Alright, welcome back, friends and fiends. How you guys doing? We're jumping in doing a stream today. It's been a minute. It's been a crazy week. I've been all over the place doing all sorts of stuff. Have not had a chance to stream, so happy to get back into it and jump in. And so, let's talk about a little bit about what we're doing today. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hopefully, you guys are doing just as well as I am, if not better. If you aren't, well, hopefully soon you will be doing just as well as me, or better. So yeah, today we're going to talk about a kind of, it's a passion mine in that sort of dungeon mastering, game mastering space. And you know what? I could do a little but look, why don't we just hop right into it? No sense in beating around the bush. Let's just get into it. So, running games requires, like, when you're sitting down as a dungeon master or game master and you're running a game, requires dozens, probably scores, if not hundreds of like tiny decisions, things that you need to decide on. It's a lot of executive function, usually when you are running a game. And knowing what you need to do in any sort of situation is like half the battle, right? Knowledge is half the battle of doing anything that you're trying to do as a GM or DM. But knowledge is great, but improvising something that's going to work in the moment, or trying to make something that's going to be dependable for the next 15 minutes, much less the next 15 sessions of whatever game you're running, if you're running an ongoing campaign, is like, that's the war. If knowledge is the battle, then that's the war, is trying to make all these tiny decisions fit together like Lego pieces or jigsaw. So, and that's all a preface, because one of the things I did in a little bit of time that I had when I wasn't doing, for the last roughly, I guess, about a week now. Wow, time really flies. But in that time, I was like, oh, I had a little bit of extra time over the weekend, in between some other stuff that I was working on. I was like, oh, there is this ongoing issue that I have as a dungeon master or a game master. And for me, one of the weaknesses that I find is that I'm not really great at improvising colors. And I've recognized that pretty readily. I'm not really diverse. I like to do a lot of mustard yellow, a lot of like lavender, and a lot of creamsicle orange. I like to pick like very specific colors instead of just saying, oh, yellow or purple or orange. I'm like, no, it's these specific kind of like go-tos of it. And that's fine when I do it the first time, but when you have a campaign like the one that I'm running now, which we are going on to session 40, upcoming very soon, and that is not going to be enough. I'm going to need some help improvising those colors. So what it turns out is like, all right, well, this is a thing that I've known for a long time. I finally have like a little bit of free time that's not dedicated to something else. So let me sit down and see if I got a little extra creative juice. Let me sit down if I can knock this out real quick over the weekend. So I did, and I started to combine these. As what it ended up being is like, I know I had been percolating on this for a while, many months, actually years at this point, kind of sitting in the back of my mind being like, okay, I think I have an understanding of how to do this. I think I know how to make this table and put it together. Luckily, my brain works like that. I tend to be a very process-oriented, procedural kind of person. So trying to figure out how do you take something as diverse as the color spectrum and break that down into something that you can very quickly kind of put together and roll up. And I was like, okay, I think I've got this. So I worked on it, and out of it, I ended up coming up with 3 tables. So it's like a 3-table system. So you roll on the first table, then the second table, then the third table, and when you put all those things together, when our powers combine, we get Captain Planet. We get our perfect color. And I think the easiest way to do this is to show it to you. And so and then we'll talk about a little bit what happened with that. So let's go base. There we go. So this is the basic thing. So I took a D8 color because I wanted to make sure that like gray and brown were in there. I started off with the colors of the rainbow. And I was like, oh, well, there's some stuff that's not covered in colors of the rainbow, which is like anything that's monochromatic as far as gray to to white and black, and doesn't really cover brown, which is the other big color it doesn't really cover. So I was like, all right, we can swap this around and make that work a little bit. There's a little bit of futzing going back and forth and doing that. So it's like, all right, we have the color, and then we've got the, sort of the hue position. This is how you determine like your hues and your tones and your tints and your shades, and that's all color theory stuff and stuff that you as Dungeon Master or Game Master don't need to know, but it's nice to know that somebody who's messing with that at least has that kind of understanding about it. The hue position is about how do we get from, say, yellow to, you know, yellow-green, somewhere in that sort of chartreuse kind of area. And so this is what the hue position does, is it takes you that and is like, all right, does it move warmer or cooler along the color spectrum? So if we had rolled, and that would work both ways. So if you rolled green and then you were like, oh, but it's a little bit warmer than that, then it would be moving back towards yellow. If it was yellow and you want something that was cooler, it would be moving towards green instead of orange. And then if you get down here, you get that, and that's desaturated tone, which means that you're adding gray into things. And a little note down here for us too, because I was like, oh, well, I still need that way to create black and white. You're like, okay, well, very warm and very cool on the gray scale. Once we hit gray is going to equal black and white. That way I still am able to get something that's either pure white or pure black, as well as all those sort of tones of gray in the middle. And then at the end we have the treatment, which is what we're gonna, that last aspect, which is the hue. It's either gonna be just kind of the pure color. We've got something that's a tint, which means it's gonna be slightly lighter by adding white. That's how the color theory works. Or it becomes a shade, which means it's darker, and that means you're adding black into it. So I sat down and I was working on this, and I banged this out, and I was like, oh, this works, and I like this, but it is like, it's a little like, it's not quick at the table. What I'm trying to get to is like, if this is great when I'm prepping, sure, that'll work when I'm prepping, but when I'm like, I need a color like now, it's not, hey, let me roll on 3 tables real quick, guys, so I can figure out what this color is. That's not really better. I think if I'm put in that position, that I would just come up with the color anyways, and that is the antithesis of what I'm trying to do with these tables. But it turns out when you do, get ready for the math, 8 times 6 times 3, that makes 144 possible combinations. And I went, oh, well, that's actually, there's a much easier implementation for this. It's like, instead of trying to do this and still leaving me in that position where I still have to figure out what color that would be when I get, let's say, red, warm red, and a tint. So it's going to be some light warmish red, and be like, okay, but what color is that? Is that like a crimson? Is that, so that was the sort of situation I was like, okay, so I thought I was going to build one thing, but it turns out what I really need to do is build something else, which is going to be a much better thing for me. And so that's how we ended up with this guy, and show him to me. And I've ended up putting this together. God, now this is what makes the furry meat. So we got a 2d12 table, so you can roll on it with 2d12s, and you know, it's a chart. You go across it. So let me go 2d12. So I need, let's say I need a random color for some, I don't know, like 100 GP gemstone. Okay, 11 and 8. All right, so 11 brings us all the way up here, and 8 brings us all the way down here. Oh, those aren't gemstones, they're pearls. Done. Easy enough. You've got a clutch of 100G pearls. All right, they're coming into port, and I'm like, oh, there's this heraldic banner that's flying up, so you know who owns it. And they're like, oh, what color is it? It's 711. It's the color of Slurpees. But 711 is going to be storm blue. So we have this nice sort of like grayish blue that's got a little bit of green into it. It's got this very sort of kind of like almost like a dark aqua kind of feel to it. And then it'd be like, and if I needed to highlight for that, it could be like, oh, that's kind of the field. And then on top of that, we have 4-3. And it's got this sort of chocolate, dark brown on it, even though maybe those colors don't work super well together as far as their ability to contrast. But it's okay. We're doing stuff on the random. It's fine. If that was always the case, we could always invert those. And so instead of doing 4-3, we could do 3-4, which would bring us to driftwood, which is maybe a little bit better. Or we could always just like pick something if we wanted to. So if that was the case, that's the nice thing about having a chart like this in front of it and be like, okay, I need something that matches well or contrasts very well with that storm blue. I can look at the stuff around it and be like, oh, I'm going to use vermilion. Vermilion's that's off that very nice. Or I could jump up and maybe it's got this navy color, so it's kind of a darker, a light field and then darker emblem on it or something like that. So realized that once I put this out and I can't take all the credit for this, it was truly my friend when I was talking to him when I was working on it. He was like, oh, it'd be really useful to have that as like a color tab to be able to see the colors while you're doing it. And I was like, oh, actually, no, that's a good idea. So I was like, I should just go in here, and this took more work than I thought it would, trying to add all the actual colors to the chart, but was definitely worth it. And gives us a lot of diversity and a lot of different ways to see it, because sometimes it can be kind of hard to, or at least I find it kind of hard to express what those colors kind of look like, especially if you're not super don't have a lot of experience trying to describe colors to people without just showing them the color. Try it. It's not as easy as you think it might be. Without using some sort of point of reference, like it's like I said, that's why I use things like mustard yellow or like creamsicle orange, because these are going to be colors that people are going to be able to tap into very easily because they've seen them many times and they kind of understand what that color is. So this kind of gives us this idea. So I tried to pick things that are relatively common colors to kind of describe, like terracotta, raspberry, orange blossom, a golden olive. There are a few somewhat stranger ones, like cornflower blue is an easy one. Like biscuit beige, however, is not like super clear as to what that color might be, but people are probably going to know like the color of like a toasted biscuit and be able to figure that out. As well as some things like gamboge, which is not a thing I was super familiar with. It's a tree sap thing. So that was a new one for me. But most of these are pretty clear. Like if you told me what Prussian blue is, I know what the color of Prussian blue is already. Depending on your background, you might know that, as well as things like ultramarine. If you have friends that are in the 40K field, they're going to be very familiar with that color. And you're not going to need to describe the exact color of blue that ultramarine is. But that kind of is what we're talking about today. So when I'm talking about like, what is that one very specific dungeon master or game master tool, that one thing that's missing in your toolkit that's going to make you just the best possible dungeon master, game master that you can be? And the thing is that I don't know what that is. For me, this was something like this, which is something that I've been meaning to make for a long time, but I was like, I know this is going to take a while for me to noodle with. So I finally had an opportunity to do that and then sit down and do it. And now I have it forever. And that will be incredibly helpful for me. That will be something that will probably make its way into this guy right here, which is my Dungeon Master Binder. In fact, this is Dungeon Master Binder 1, technically. But they serve different purposes. This is the at the table sort. Then I have one that helps me prep adventures, and then one that's for like campaign logistics or like world building and things like that. So if I go to DM Binder number 3 if I need to build a city, but if I need to know like what trap is in this hallway, that's this guy. I will have that in. So creating your own custom Dungeon Master or Game Master tools or references, anything like that, I feel it's a very time-honored tradition of being a dungeon master or a game master, and I feel like it is, honestly, it's a rite of passage as you're getting into the hobby and you start running games from behind the screen. So you get to the point where you're like, okay, there are a lot of really, really great first party and third party tools and aids that are really, really fantastic and are extremely helpful. But they're also not personalized to you, and they may not be useful for you. Like, one of the ones that comes up very often that you'll hear for a lot of people as like a reference that a lot of people need is like a list of names. That's usually not a thing that I need very often. And in fact, I don't mind rolling on a roll table to do that, like at the table, and let my players roll on the roll table and let it be slightly interactive, and they can figure out what the name of somebody is. I don't find that breaks the immersion too much and makes it feel like more of a collaborative world building thing. And they know if they're coming across somebody who I've already given a name to, I have either pre-planned that NPC so they kind of get a metagame kind of like tick that's like, oh, this is probably somebody worth talking to. This is going to have some sort of information or have some quest attached to them or have some sort of specific item or interaction that's kind of going on. Not always. Sometimes it's like, hey, there are NPCs in this adventure and they don't really have anything to do, but I know this is a particular person they might run across, and I might just give them a name just so I don't have to keep calling them that guy over there or that gal over there or whatever we're calling them. So I can actually give them a name and be like, oh, here's a thing for you. It's sort of in the same way that I don't need a lot of encounter building tools because I feel like I'm very experienced and robust at being able to build encounters. That I don't need a lot of those aspects to try to like, oh, here's how the type of creatures you want to put together. Like, I'm pretty good at doing that synergy stuff and about creating a somewhat interesting battlefield that has different aspects and stuff going on. But that might not be the case for you. So I don't know what your personal style of dungeon mastering is. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? What is your style of play? What are you good at? What do you struggle with? I don't know that. And I don't think, in the same way that I don't know it, I don't know that any first party or third party tool can possibly know that for that. I think they shoot for the most common denominator about things that they feel like most people, especially newer dungeon masters, game masters, often struggle with. So that's what they kind of focus on. But building tools around your specific style of play that compensate for your specific weaknesses, that figure out the things that make you slow at the table, like the things that kind of break the flow or pacing of the game where you have to go, you have that kind of moment where I don't know. So having that personalized toolkit, having these things that you can make for yourself will fashion you into this cyborg dungeon master so you can be a harder, better, faster, stronger game master and run better games in that way. So, because I don't know specifically what your weakness or strength is personally as a dungeon master, everybody's different. It's one of the great strengths and weaknesses of the hobby is that some game masters are really, really good at very specific things and really, really weak at other things. And, you walk 10 paces and there's another dungeon master at a different table in the game shop or wherever you are, and they run a totally different style of game in which those things are reversed. So what can we do to try to figure out what makes for a great GM tool or aid? And that's one of the things that I want to showcase sort of with this one that I built. And be like, okay, these are the things that they kind of talk about what makes it good and what makes it bad. And the idea is that it's, as a spoiler, it's not random everything. This is one of a situation where I like big random table books. I have many a number of them. Some of them are on the shelf behind me. I have many more in digital form. But they're great, and random tables work very well, long as they have a distinct purpose, you have a distinct purpose for them. Uh, I think this is one of the greatest lessons you can learn from doing something like solo TTRPG game playing, is that having more random tables or more ways to inject stuff into your game does not make for a better game. What you end up finding, I think I have found, and I think most people find if they go down that hobby for a little bit, that particular niche of the hobby for a while, is that you find you spend a lot more time looking stuff up than maybe playing. So it's really trying to figure out what are the most useful tools and resources I can have within hand's reach and go with that. And then anything else I'll make up. And I'll just have to wing it. And that's okay. We're not going to have a perfect tool for everything. But I figured I would show off a few of my tools in addition to the one that we just took a look at. And then we can talk a little bit about how these form or fit the criteria that I think exists for making a tool or reference that is going to be useful for you, no matter what necessarily your style is. All of these should help you fit, thread that needle. Let's put it that way. So, first one I wanted to show off is and those who have watched the solo RPG are going to know about these. They might not have seen them because I often will only reference them because they're not worth pulling up because I just need to look at them for a second. So I'll just look at the physical copy I have right next to me that I use, and I also use all the time as a Dungeon Master and Game Master. But now we're going to sit down and look at it. So you're going to get yourselves a little treat. Hope you're ready. So, what's the first one let's look at? Let's look at, I'm pull this up real quick. And of course, as we're going through this, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop those in. But we are going to go in and jump into, I think let's do wilderness dressing first. I think that's a good table to start with. So I've talked about this many times, and certainly in the solo RPG, seeing how I do run hex crawls, and that when I make random encounter checks, instead of rolling a d6 and then a random encounter shows up on a 1, I roll a d12, and then on the 1, usually some sort of random encounter happens as per usual. But if I roll a 12, then usually there is a dressing encounter, which is usually going to be a non-combat encounter. It can be a combat encounter, but it's usually a non-combat encounter, whereas other random encounters tend to be more likely to be random. Show this up. Wilderness dressing. So this is a table that's in here. It's in the front. I use it all the time. There she is right there. So it's broken down by biome. It's a 1d20 table. Very, very simple. So we've got Arctic and tundra, plains and scrublands, the desert, forest and boreal. Forest in the temperate, like broadleaf, and boreal or pine forest aspects. We have jungle, we have wetlands, we have hills and mountains, and then we have the coast and water. Like I said, and like on most tables that I do, and this is really good, and a little pro tip if you don't already do this, is that instead of rolling 1d20, you can roll 2d20 and see if you can combine them. That takes anything that's like a 1d20 table and gets it a lot closer to being about like a 380 different potential things that it could be. So it kind of gives you a little bit more bang for your buck without loading out. Like if I was making a 1d400 roll table, that'd be a huge table. So instead just using 2 and then rolling twice and then trying to put them together, or just using whichever one makes more sense for the situation. Let's say let's see, I want to choose some place that we're not currently doing in the solo RPG or the game that I'm running. Let's do hills and mountains. Why not? So you have a party, they're going through this sort of highlands area. Maybe they're on a plateau or something like that. And we roll natural 20s, so that's nice. Wish we'd saved that for the solo RPG, but here we are. And they're going to have some sort of dressing encounter. So probably not a combat encounter, but it might be. Just less likely to be. Because there are results here that could very much end in combat. Oh, we got a 7 and a 20. That's the wrong table. There we go. And we said that we were going to do hills and mountains. So 7, find some sort of cave or overhang. That's a very easy one. So good thing to be like, maybe there's a place where they can rest here, or it's protected, or maybe there's some information that they can find in there. Might be an opportunity to do some world building by adding in some cave drawings or remnants of an old camp or something like that, or maybe somebody, the smuggler's den, they've done something like that. Or it's great if there's any sort of weather that's going on, like raining or something like that, they can take shelter under an area like this. Or if there's maybe you have a great dragon or something that's flying overhead, they can, if it's an overhang or a cave or something, they can duck down under there and get out of sight. One. And a hidden bowl or a valley, so a place that most people don't know exists. And this, we could combine these and be like, oh, it's a cave. Cave is actually a tunnel, and it ports out on the other side into this sort of hidden bowl, this quiet little bowl down there that's maybe got some stuff in there that's interesting. And who knows what they could find down there. So you can add in things like that. So if you're looking for doing some random encounters, or you're looking for an opportunity, or if you're like me and you're running this, something like this, and your players are, moving from point A to point B, and they come across this tunnel and they follow through it, and they kind of go on a little misadventure here for a second, and then you're like, oh, and it seems to port out into this sort of hidden valley down in here, and they're like, oh, well, we definitely want to go explore that. You're like, okay, we have gone beyond the bounds of probably what I have prepped for whatever this session or adventure is. That's fine. That's why one of the things that I know that I am weak at this sometimes, one of the things that I usually include in here is what I call a parachute file, which is in the back. I usually have, a few different adventures. 3 is a pretty good number. Just like 1-page, one-shot little adventures that are roughly for the party's level and roughly for the biome they're in. So I would probably have a number of 2 or 3 different like hills or mountainous kind of adventures, and I could flip to the back and see if I could find one that would fit real quick, or at least see if I can get enough going that I can kind of riff on it until the end of the session, and then that gives me more time to prep for what's going to happen there. But, all of that is improvised on the spot once the players go kind of off the rails, and because it is sometimes, as a dungeon master or a game master, the style of game that I like to run is not one where I want to pick up my players and put them on the railroad and they go from one scene to another, like stations along a literal railroad. Be like, oh, you got to the station where there's a combat encounter, and now that happens, and now back on here, and keep going. I like to have a little bit more free form, so I like to encourage that. I want to be able to improvise these things where it's like, oh, if they don't have a time limit that they're dealing with, or they're just moving from A to B, and they're looking for stuff to do in between because maybe they've got some downtime coming up or whatever it is. They're like, oh, here's an opportunity, here's like a little side quest or a rumor or something you can pick up and explore during that time period, and check it out. So let's do another one. Let's do coast or water. This is a good one for like ships. You're doing like boat stuff. Let's say that they're on a ship. Got another 7. Nice. 7 and 12. So we could have some seabirds come down as a nuisance, so they could have a flock of seagulls come down and start pecking at them, which is always fun. And trying to peck at them, steal their food, and do all sorts of shenanigans while they're up there. As well as just being annoying. We also had 12. Thick seaweed or hazard or terrain. So yeah, maybe the boat that you guys are in, maybe it's a small craft. It gets tangled up in sort of like a kelp forest. And obviously there are a lot of birds around here because it's a thriving ecosystem of food for them. And you're kind of stuck there, so they're having to figure out how to get themselves out of this kelp forest, and or maybe investigate what's in it while they're down there. But all the while, anytime that they're trying to work on this, they have this constant nuisance of these seagulls flying around and doing stuff with them, and they're coming down and attacking them, which allows me to like raise the DC a little bit, or maybe give them, and it'd be like chip damage. I'm not going to try to kill them with a bunch of seagulls probably. So I'd have them come down and be like, oh, every time that you guys are working on this and you don't pass, and you make an attempt, gonna take like a d4 of damage or something like that, as these things kind of come down here and accost you and claw at you and peck at you and do that sort of stuff. Hey, what's going on, Dylan? How do you feed rumors to your PCs? Just intel learned in the tavern kind of idea? Yeah, there's lots of people. I tend to feed it through NPCs they already know. I'm blessed right now that my current group of adventurers that I'm running for are pretty good about talking to NPCs. They'll do a lot of talky talk, so it's really easy to kind of feed that in. So yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious. It's generally like, let's see, the most recent one that I kind of gave them a rumor for is they were on a market day. They were resting. They needed to rest for one of their party members to recover from exhaustion. So I was like, okay, this is going to be kind of a downtime day. There's not a whole lot for them to do. They are literally waiting on one of their fellow PCs to be able to like move on. And so while they're doing that, they're like, oh, it's a market day, so we'll go down and check out stuff in the market. And I was like, oh, well, this is one of the things that I wanted to be down there. And I wanted to give them some intel about like what's stuff that's going on in the area. They haven't spent a lot of time in this part of the island that they're on. So I wanted to give them an idea of like some other stuff they could do. And they were also rumors were tied very, very thinly to the overall plot of what they're working on, which is dealing with a blight. And so I was like, okay, there are these different people here. And one of the things I was like, all right, there's going to be this, what I was calling a blushers caravan. So it is a troop of like traveling prostitutes. It's like a traveling brothel with a very sort of like Romani Vardo kind of wagons that kind of break open into like a stage and like little private quarters in the back that are basically just a bed for, you know, a little romp of fun. And have it down there. And then talking about I'm trying to remember how it came up. They were talking to somebody. It was a conversation that one of the PCs overheard, which is a good way to kind of interact with that and be like, hey, while you're, you know, sipping your beer or whatever, your ale in the tavern or wherever you're at, is like you overhear these two people talking about this thing. And they were talking about, oh, these people are interested in trying to track down these Pegasi that are in the area. They're rumored to be in the area just north of here. They're looking for somebody who's going to go out and do that for them. And apparently there are already some groups that have taken that quest. And so they talk to them and they talk a little bit about it. There's a lot of RP that goes into it and a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with that adventure. But they kind of get into it. And they talk about it, and then once they're talking to the proprietor, he tells them a little bit about it. It's like, oh yeah, we have this thing. If you guys look like competent adventurers, because of course they're all kitted up like adventurers. You guys look like competent adventurers, so we're looking for Pegasi like tail and like mane hair to make like makeup brushes, because they're supposed to be imbued with magical power to make our makeup look even better, to make my girls look even prettier. So giving them that idea. And so the idea being that if they go and look that, there's also going to be an opportunity for them to talk to the Pegasi and also deal with the other people who are hunting them, who may be actually killing them, and go deal with the Pegasi. And then when they're talking to the Pegasi, they can actually figure out that there's an opportunity for them to leverage that into the blight stuff that's going on, because they are celestial creatures. So they have this ability that they have some celestial properties and magic attached to them, and the grove in which they kind of live. So yeah. But yeah, in the market you overhear X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I kind of followed them. You always have to be kind of okay with them just blowing past them. I would probably say that I am a little over enthusiastic. I will shotgun a lot of potential rumors and quest stuff at my players. I need to actually probably um like actually rein that in a little bit, because I will just throw stuff at them. But I run a very big sandboxy hex crawl kind of game right now, so there's tons of stuff around them. So it's just basically what's around in the area, what are these people talking about, what are the issues that they're dealing with, and like the local community. So especially something like a market day, because you have people that are traveling in from like other villages and stuff to come to that market day. There's ability for a big mixing bowl of like information to go on and talk to a bunch of different people. Another good thing that I've do is, or I've included or started doing, is that I will drop in lower level like hamlets and villages that have a lower population. There's not a standard inn, so if the player characters need to, rest, they need accommodations, they usually need to bunk up with one or more different people in the village. So they'll tend to split off into 2 or 3 different households, and they'll talk to those people, and they kind of spend the evening with those people. So they want to hear news about their travels and what's going on in the world. They tell them about, oh, there's this stuff going on here and here. There are these people, or I have a cousin down in that backwater village over there, and they said that, and he told me about this thing that's going on. So it's very natural, organic, kind of just making conversation kind of thing. How do I feel about side quests not necessarily being linked to the main plot? Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. Absolutely fine with it. I don't care if they are or not. But that is also, like I said, I run a hex crawl kind of game, where there is not necessarily as much of an overall plot. There is one, but that tends, for me, the way that I run is I usually don't start a campaign with that in mind, and let whatever it is, the thing that they latch on, kind of become the emergent overall plot. So it's a little bit different. So otherwise, yeah, there's tons of stuff that's not related to anything else that's going on. It's just kind of dozens of like little different situations that are happening on this island that they're on, and whatever they decide to like take the bait of, whatever kind of hooks them, that kind of becomes the emergent, I guess what you would call the main plot of the campaign, until they wrap that up, which may or may not transition into something that's related or not. Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say check out like the 5x5 plot structure or adventure structure. That's a really good way to do that. Is you can take like one aspect from one adventure and dovetail it into another adventure. So if you have whoever the patron was, that patron doesn't necessarily have to continue to be the patron for the next one, but they might be an ally or an informant for the next adventure. So they might have to like circle back to somebody they've already met. So you can kind of have these recurring NPCs in the same way that's like, oh, we defeated this guy and we got this treasure, but this treasure has a cursed object in it, and now we need to, maybe it's a powerful magic item, and maybe we know that there's a way to get the curse off the magic item, so that becomes its own quest, and then you go and take that. So I think there become like these little chain links in between adventures without having it all be like one big monolithic plot necessarily. Yep, but hopefully that's helpful. So this is a table that I use obviously a lot. I like it a lot. I want to provide lots of opportunities, lots of moments, and the stuff that kind of like happens in the middle, because I think that especially with tables like these, like exploration and travel can be really, really boring in D&D. I don't necessarily want to fully skip it all the time. Sometimes it's like, yeah, you follow the road from A to B. We'll see if there's anything that happens on the road. Not likely, depending on where you are in the world. But if you like get off the main roads and you're doing some hex crawling and stuff like that, then I'll start to roll a lot more on these tables as you're kind of going through the hexes. Be like, oh, there's an opportunity that you come across these weird obstacles or stuff because you're off the beaten path. There's stuff you don't know about. So let's do like an Arctic or Tundra, and then we'll move on. All right, 14 and 12. All right, so 14 is being stalked by a predator. I really like that one. It doesn't come up that often, but I really like that one. And a large dune of ice or snow. So this is a good one to have them kind of like do a little hazard where maybe they have like an ice floe that like breaks away and they have to drop down into a little ice cavern, or they take a little tumble. They get a little damage or something like that. It's not a big thing. It's mainly just to kind of show like, hey, this is not a super safe or nice place to be. I do like Stalked by a Predator. I feel like I don't use this one very much, or primarily I don't roll it all that often. But Stalked by a Predator simply means that there are things, and this doesn't necessarily have to be like an animal. It can be goblins or something like that. That there are people who are trailing you. The easiest way to kind of show this off is to do something like a pack of wolves. Talk about an RPG, TTRPG cliche would be you get attacked by a pack of wolves because you're in the forest, and wolves attack. That's not how wolves work. First off, they don't attack like groups of heavily armed people. Not really what they do. They're more likely to go after a single target that's off by itself. But maybe they're stalking you. So you guys, as you are traveling across this Arctic tundra area, you see that there's a pack of like gray wolves. We could even make them dire wolves if we wanted to. And there's maybe a dozen of them, and they're just watching you, and they're staying like far enough away from you that you can't really engage them in combat. Like if somebody has a longbow, they could take a shot at them, but they're beyond the range of like most spells and most things. And they're just gonna follow you. And so that way that every time the players decide they want to camp, or every time that somebody gets distracted and they go off to do something by themselves, it's really great if you have one of those lone wolf characters. It's fun. Who's like, oh well, I need to go do something by myself. Oh well, now it's dark and now you're by yourself, and now there's a dozen wolves out there that you forgot about. And that's when they're going to attack. They're going to look for an opportunity when you guys are hurt, after maybe you've already had a combat with somebody else and you guys are really beat up. Maybe that's when they decide to charge in and see if they can pick off one of the weaker ones, see if they can drag you off and make a meal out of you. Trying to be like it is an unforgiving, unsettling aspect to just know that there are these dangerous creatures that are just around. Like I said, it's a nice one to do with like a pack of goblins, especially once you kind of, even when you get to like levels 5 or 6, it's like, yeah, now a group of goblins isn't that big of a deal. But a group of goblins when you're in camp, and assuming that they have a different motivation, which is probably steal your stuff and not actually kill you, knowing that, oh, well, if only one of us is on watch, and there's a chance that one of us fails a watch, that might be when they decide to slink into camp and try to rifle through your stuff, try to steal your supplies, try to take your magic items, all that kind of good stuff. And if you wake up and try to have a combat with them, they run away. You guys are like 6th level adventurers. They're not here to fight you. They're what, a quarter CR. They're not. They understand the pecking order of the world. They know that they cannot stand up to you, so they're gonna run from you. So those are the sort of ways that I use these sort of wilderness dressing tables as a way to kind of impact that and make that world feel a little bit more robust, kind of give it a little bit more life. You feel like it is a thing that you guys are kind of going through as adventurers, that you feel like oh yeah, we really are kind of going through the tundra, and there are these very hungry predators who are watching us. Oh, snow isn't super safe. Like it could be a snowbank that's hiding like a huge drift, and we're gonna drop like 15 feet into a hole. Those kinds of things. Especially if you're trying to do some survival aspects as well, and be like, okay, you're gonna take some cold damage and you're gonna have some trouble. We're gonna make a con save here in a little bit, not right now, to see if you can like warm back up, or if not, you're gonna start getting like hypothermia and dealing with things like that. If that's the kind of game you want to play, that's the kind of game I like. But it's not for everybody. I understand that, but that's why we're making personalized DM tools, about making things that work for your table. That's the kind of games that I want to run, kinds of things that I want to enforce and make the world feel like it's like a living part of the campaign, like it's its own kind of character in a way. That's why I have things like this. So let's move on to the next one, which is my improvised trap and hazard table. I think this is right here. It is indeed. So improvising traps and hazards. Because there are way too many times, especially early in my Dungeon Master career, and I think maybe this will make sense for you as well, when you're like, oh, there's a trap in here, or this isn't a dungeon that I was planning on running, or they've gone off the beaten path and I need to improvise stuff. Like, oh, traps. When I think about traps, I'm like, okay, off the top of my head, the most common traps are pitfall, poison gas, poison dart, spear, maybe scything blades. You're like, great, that's not very many traps. And then when I think about, oh, what is the trigger for that trap? And it's almost always, oh, there's some sort of like trigger plate you step on or something like that. I was like, well, I don't want to do that. I want traps that are and hazards that are much cooler, because I feel like when it comes to hazards, most of the things it's like, I don't know, there's like a chasm in the floor. That's usually what comes up in dungeons. I know there's a big hole in the floor that you got to get over. Okay. I was like, I need something that's going to stretch my imagination, both when I'm running it live and as well when I'm prepping adventures. This is stuff that's also in like my building dungeons supplement stuff that's sort of in that, I said DM Binder 2, which is more about like prepping adventures and dungeons and adventure locations. Try to force myself to get a little bit better at that. Try to make things a little bit more interesting. So let's roll an improvised trap real quick. So we need a d12 and 2 d4s. Again, one of the nice things is we can roll double on that. I usually don't roll doubles on the triggers and stuff. So 6, 5, 1, 1, that makes it easy. You know what? I think we can close that table. I don't think we're going to be looking back at the color ones here in a minute. We can close one pressing as well. And now I forgot what it was. 6, 5. Okay. So already we're off to a good start, because I'm like, okay, 6 is harmer, so it's something that's going to do something that doesn't do hit point damage. Hit point damage is number 4. That's the murder trap. It just tries to kill you. This one does something else. It does a harmer trap. It gives you some sort of condition. Tries to give you a level of exhaustion. It's going to do some sort of stat damage, where it's going to give you like strength damage or dex damage or con damage. So something like that. And then 5 is a resource eater. Same thing. So I wanted to find different ways, because traps are really, really boring. When they are like, oh, you missed the perception check and you stepped on it and you failed the dex save, so you took 20 hit points of damage. Cool, moving on. So I want something that's a little bit different, or a little bit more like, getting hit by a trap really doesn't feel great, or it does something different. So this harmer one is a great way of doing that. Because we have monsters that already do these kinds of things too. Armors that do that thing where they're going to give you a condition. They're going to do, like shadows are a good example of like strength damage that kill a lot of low level parties, especially level 1 parties. Because they do strength damage. And they hit you like 3 times, and you have a PC that might be dead. And at full hit points. You have the Resource Eater, which is going to eat things like hit dice, which are very different. So instead of taking your actual HP right now, we're taking your ability to potentially heal yourself later. So now every encounter you go into after getting that damage, after having losing hit dice, it means that you can't heal yourself as well. You can't build yourself back up, because remember, in 5th edition and 5.5, you still only get half your level rounded down of hit dice back when you complete a long rest. So if you're going into a dungeon delve, or you're going into an adventure, having that up front means that players have to start thinking a lot more tactically or thoughtfully about what kind of nonsense they get into, because they're like, well, I won't be able to heal myself if we take a short rest, because if I do that, I'll pass the threshold in which I will get all my hit dice back when we take a long rest. And then that kind of becomes a weird little death spiral. And that takes a long time. That's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's attrition. which is a good way to think about dungeon mastering and attacking PCs. PCs try to do a whole bunch of damage very, very quickly. As a dungeon master or game master, the game works often at its best when you're doing little chunks of damage and attrition over a long period of time, because PCs can handle that in a way that monsters can't. That's why monsters and PCs are built very different, because they have different functions. Monsters are only supposed to last for an encounter. PCs have to last through every encounter. So making every encounter hurt them just a little bit more. You know, hurt them a little bit, slow them down a little bit, give them a few less resources, that sort of thing. Really, over time, really builds up and makes the adventure, the threat of that, or the tension of that, ratchets up slowly and slowly as you go through the adventure. Really builds that tension, which is really nice. So, it'd be hard to do both of these. Not impossible, but we could. A good example of a resource eater that's not really on here would be things like rust monsters or the gray uses. I think it's gray uses. It's like every time that they get hit or they hit you, they chip away your armor's efficiency or your weapons, blunt your weapons if you're using metal weapons. That eats a resource that is not hit points. Because suddenly your paladin's not going to be very happy if they no longer have their plate mail. Life's about to get real rough for your paladin if they don't have their plate mail on them. And you can chip through that pretty easily if you have a big ooze encounter. And start taking away like their weapons and stuff. Ugh. It's a tough one. So for this, I would probably do, because we didn't provide any context for this, so let's do something easy. Let's say it does hit die. Hit die is a nice one. You can always like flavor it as like necromancy spells or stuff like that. That's really fun. And then the trigger is sensor or perception, so it's going to be, that's a very easy one. And there's no reset on it because we rolled 2 ones. Perfect. So they come across the door. In front of the door, let's say that the door, it looks suitably evil in necromancy. You know, it's this reinforced dark wood door with a black iron on it, and then around it is this motif of bones that's kind of scrawled into the arch that's around it. And at the top, there's this big, laughing and grinning skull with these glowing red eyes. It's beyond human size, but like quite large. And actually, it won't be glowing. So that way, when they enter the room and they come within view of what, like standing in front of the line of sight of what that skull is, the skull's eyes will light up, and then will attack them. Probably have them make some sort of like Constitution save or something like that. If they fail, then it's like, oh, you feel this necromantic energy hook into you, like rip its talons deep into your chest, and it pulls out this wisp of energy. And it's not that you feel your hit points, you don't take any physical damage, you look at yourself and you feel fine, but you feel not quite exhausted, but you feel like it has tapped some of your essence, pulled you away, and be like, okay, everybody who failed is going to lose like 3 hit dice. And if you saved, you're going to lose a hit dice or no hit dice, depending on what it is. Very easy. Super easy improvised trap. Very different than doing the same old, there was a pit trap in front of that door. Missed that again. Or there was a little poison needle inside of the locked door while you were trying to unlock it, and you got pinched by the poison needle. And now you have... No, that would be that is a condition, right? You usually take some damage, and then you usually get the poison condition. That's a way of how these work together. So that could be a murder and a harmer together. Probably more a harmer, because it's unlikely that a little poison pin's going to do enough damage to kill a PC. And if you're doing something like that, you really should be trying... If it is a trap that is simply there to do hit point damage, you should really make it a legitimate threat to their life. There's a really, really good... Or I should say it's baseline good. In the 2014 DMG, I've changed it for the limited damage. It's probably the best table in the 2014 DMG guide is the how to improvise damage table. I've changed it a little bit for myself. It's a little bit different, but the math works out almost exactly the same, except this time it's very easy for me to remember instead of trying to remember how many dice to roll. It's for one creature, it's XD10 plus X, where X is the level of the party. And for something that's an area effect or hits multiple people, like this necromancy one would be, if we were just doing hit point damage, be XD6 plus X. So let's say that they were, we were going to take 3 away, so let's say that they were like 7th level. So if they were 7th level, we'd be rolling 7d6. So on average damage, they would be taking that 20 damage plus 7 again for their levels. So an average on 27 damage if they succeeded, if they failed, and then half of that if they succeeded, which would be 13. So very, very easy to make that kind of stuff up on the fly. Is why I have these tools, because things that I want to be able to make that. Like I make that, I could improv that trap very, very easily knowing the table now. That's the thing that's very useful for me, because it means I can throw something together really quickly if I need to. Improvised hazards do the same thing. Let's say we're going through another dungeon. Let's say it's like an abandoned warehouse or something like that. That seems fun. This abandoned village, and now we're in like a warehouse area of it. 9 and 4. So some sort of noisemaker, or a pool, or a pond. Based off of the one that I gave us a warehouse description, a derelict warehouse. So pool or pond's a little difficult, but we could say that maybe it's like a dockside warehouse, and maybe like the bottom piles that this warehouse has been built upon has broken through, and so there is an opportunity where like you can fall through into like the seawater, the dockside underneath, if you don't get over it. And maybe there's a bridge, maybe there's like some boards laid across it or something. That's a nice choke point, so if you have an encounter in the room, that's a really good place to have kind of be the center of the encounter. The PCs kind of come in from one side and they need to get through the door on the other side. In the middle, there's a little choke point where they get towards the bridge where they need to go across that. Or they can try to jump across it. Or figure out some other shenanigans. Noisemakers. There is one go-to noisemaker for D&D, and that is, oh man, what are those things called? They're little mushrooms, little fungi guys. They don't really do any damage, but when you get close to them, they like basically let off an air horn. So these are fun. And I have this where it just says wandering monster roll. That means that like if they set this off, it's a proc for me to roll for a wandering monster encounter. That would be that opportunity to be like, oh, if they do this, and we could just be that like there's a whole bunch of, the hazard is that this is a dilapidated warehouse, so you have a whole bunch of like crates and barrels that have tumbled over and mismatched, and they're gonna have to move some of that stuff to get through. But in doing that, maybe we'll make a check for that. We'll roll like a random DC, which you guys have seen me do before, obviously. We go, okay, you need to make, all right, so that's gonna be, I don't know, that's actually slightly high. DC 19, some sort of check. You guys tell me how you're doing this. And that you need to move and arrange these barrels and crates and get them out of the way. They fail that, a bunch of stuff tumbles and clatters to the ground, kind of makes a big noise in this otherwise very silent township, port town that we're in, that I've decided in. And so it's totally silent, and then it's like, oh, you make a bunch of noise, and for a moment, there is silence. And that's when I'm gonna pick up this D6 behind here and roll for a random encounter. You guys wait a beat. But hear nothing. So it's just an opportunity that something might happen as that obstacle. So it doesn't always have to be something that you're going to get necessarily a bad thing out, but that is the best way to use random encounters, is to make them just kind of a constant threat. And constant makes it seem like you're rolling for them all the time. And I have a very clear idea about when I roll for wandering monsters or random encounters. And it's usually whenever the players stop making forward progress in what they're doing. So if they sat here and they were really talking about, oh well, should we go through here? Should maybe we should go around and go around this warehouse and go do something else. Like, if you guys are just standing around having a conversation out in the middle of this abandoned street, there's a chance something might roll up on you. So I'm gonna roll for that. Or if they decide, okay, we went forward, and then like, we're gonna backtrack actually and go back the other way. Okay, if you decide to backtrack, there's a chance that you might run into somebody who wasn't there before. I'm gonna make another wandering monster roll. And so it's usually just a d6, and if I roll a 1, it happens. So, it's a pretty low, but it does come up. The worst part is that sometimes, worst, could be the best. I enjoy it, but my players not always, is that you can have a wandering monster show up and it pushes them forward into an encounter that's already been planned. And so they end up fighting 2 encounters at once. So sometimes it's really nice, like I said, when you build an adventure or a campaign, this idea that you're focused on attrition. Whereas if you were building encounters where you're like, we have to make this a tooth and nail fight every single encounter, it's like all the way ratcheted up on our XP budget all the way. Like if you throw 2 of those together, if you run 2 of those encounters into one encounter, you have a significantly higher chance of wiping your party, of getting a total party killed, or at least one person going down for real. And generally, I think I'll speak for all of us Dungeon Masters and Game Masters that generally we don't want to do that. Generally, that's not what we want to do. But if you do lower level encounters, then you can smush 2 encounters together, and they'll probably make it through all right, but it will be significantly more dangerous than what they're used to. But you should also vary encounter difficulty. This goes to stuff that I've talked about before, like building sledgehammer encounters and cookie encounters, where cookie encounters are real easy encounters that are meant there to boost the player's confidence, where they come in and they just kick the bad guys, the monster's teeth in, and they're just like, well, that was easy. We feel great. High fives all around. And then they go into the next encounter, and that's a sledgehammer encounter, and that's going to be the most difficult encounter in the entire adventure. It's the one that truly is dialed all the way up. And then they're like, oh, that one kicked us in the teeth. And now I feel like I don't know what's coming next. That's good, because that makes them think about being careful and cautious, which is a good place to be. Should we do another one? Then this gets into dungeon encounters, which is not one that I use anymore. I realize that this does not work for me. There's lots of tools when you'll build this stuff. It won't work like that. Let's do, I got like one more to show that I think will really kind of hit it off, and then we'll talk about each of these and how they kind of fit together. I'm touching on it, but I haven't talked about the actual steps yet. So let's do that. All right. So, monster preoccupation table. What page is that on? Oh, it's right in front. Okay. Give me a second. I have to go find this. Not on the page. I was. Of course, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to drop. All right. On page, right? What? No. Well, where is it? Yeah, that's the one I was just looking at. Oh, I guess we could look at dungeon dressing too. Yeah, maybe we'll look at dungeon dressing later if we have time. I don't need to double dip on that. All right. Quick reference. Yes, it is indeed quick reference. Okay, I have found it. One of the things that I also realized that I really struggled with as a Dungeon Master Game Master is, hey, what are those monsters doing? Because some adventures, depending on if you're running pre-built or pre-made adventures or dungeons or whatever, some are really good about telling you what the monsters are doing or what the antagonists are doing in the scene. Others give you no information whatsoever. So I was like, oh, well, so when I'm building it, I was like, I want a little something something. So that's what this is. Nice 1d10. This is usually not one that I'll roll twice on, but you could if you had a suitably big enough group. It's just like, hey, when PCs are going in a dungeon or going to some place, or this will work for any sort of like camp they come across or anything. Anytime that there's any sort of NPCs or monsters who are just around that they're sneaking up on, or maybe they're just walking up to, it's nice to know what they're doing. Again, I can roll 2d10 and then take whatever seems the most appropriate. So let's set a scene. I like the camp one. Let's say that there are some... The adventuring party is traveling, and they cross over the crest of a hill, and they see that there is, let's say, a camp of orcs that have made camp down there. It doesn't really matter. I rolled 2 8s. Perfect. So what are they doing? They're deep into some sort of conversation. There's a whole bunch of them standing around talking, or maybe sitting around a campfire talking. And as you get closer, I can be a little bit more specific about what they overhear, especially if they have somebody in the party who either speaks Orcish or has comprehend languages or something that gives them the ability to understand what they're saying. And then we can kind of give them the tone, or might be able to pick up the tone just on it, depending on, but I don't know. Orcish could have that German kind of issue where it just kind of sounds like sometimes people are just angry, even if they're not. But you'd be like, oh, you can see that somebody's like clearly berating somebody in there. They're having some sort of like intense discussion about something. They seem to be, drinking and telling jokes. They're like chortling with laughter and stuff, like they're telling stories. Or maybe they're all like huddled around something and they're trying to troubleshoot some sort of issue or problem that they're having. And maybe they're trying to maybe they have like a piece of loot that they have and they're looking at it forward and back, and maybe they can't tell what it's supposed to be. Maybe some sort of like artificer kind of thing, which might be interesting if you were running something that's, let's say, had an adventure or had some sort of rumor or side quest that's dealt with an artificer. Like if I had one of the more common magic items in my custom homebrew world, this thing called a cricket box, which is something that you can put a magic item in. It's basically a lead-lined box, and that protects it and like keeps it from divination and keeps the magic from emanating and all that stuff. So there could be some orcs down there that have a cricket box and not know what it is, and so they're just kind of like looking at this box and they're like, what's with this heavy box? Why is there this weird heavy box? So they're just trying to figure out what it is. But that gives them the idea, like whoever's sneaking up there, if they have a wizard or an artificer in the party, they're more likely to be able to just without a roll be like, oh, that's a cricket box. Where'd they get that thing from? It's named a cricket box because the person who invented it, artificer named Cricket. So that's a very easy one. Let's do another one. Let's do something in the dungeon. Now this will also work sort of for non-humanoid creatures too. Let's say you know what? We'll circle back to those Arctic like timber wolves, Arctic wolves. Yeah, they're gray wolves or whatever. There's a pack of wolves. What are they up to? Party sneaks up onto them. 5 or 4. If I do the right thing. There we go. So they could be leisure, which means they could be like, I would be like, oh, they're doing that dog wolf thing where they're like play fighting, doing that kind of thing. Or it could be like, oh, they're like giving themselves like little dirt baths and stuff, and like chewing on themselves because they probably have like mites or mange or whatever. So they're doing a little bit of self-grooming and playing around. So very easy to be like, oh, that's what they see. And if they do a little animal handling check, or they have like a druid or ranger in the party, you'll probably without a roll be able to tell them, oh, here's like the specific thing that they're doing. Or give them a little additional information about what they're looking at, because these are sort of people who would have a better insight into that. be able to lean in. So yeah, I mean, it's very simple. You can do this for like NPCs in their homes. It's such a great little dumb little table that I love using all the time. And then be like, oh, we're gonna go visit. Let's see, in the campaign I'm running, they're gonna go visit Pearl, which is somebody, an NPC, that the recurring NPC that they know. What is Pearl up to? Again, worth it to roll twice, so you don't have to re-roll. Either up to that. We won't go with talking. Let's go with food. So she's sitting down to have maybe some tea. So when they call upon Pearl and they enter, they can see her having her nice like silvered ewer and nice china, and she's having tea when they call upon her. Served by her steward, is the other NPC that's with her. Just helps to like give a little bit of quick context to what's happening during that time. Very, very simple, very easy to run, very easy to just add just a little bit of color into that situation. What I'm looking for. And you know, those are good examples about like stuff that I built for myself. Like you're not going to find any of those. I mean, obviously you'll be able to find things like random encounters or like trap builders. I've never found a trap builder that was anything like the one that I have, but you can certainly find plenty and plenty of things that give you all sorts of like random traps, and usually they're pre-built traps. But you can find that sort of stuff. I was like, I don't want to use pre-built traps because then it means that like I always have to know how that specific trap works. Whereas if I have something that allows me to build it like that, not an issue. So, what is sort of the criteria that we're looking for? Because again, thing with personalized DM tools is like I can't tell you what's going to be the right tool for you. Only you're going to know that. As you go through and you run more games, you'll understand like, oh, I'm really struggling with this, or I wish I was faster at doing this, or something like that. So I took that and I was like, okay, so what are the things that my tools do for me that I think would be useful for anybody's tool, regardless of what it is, for them to do? So the first one is it produces something you can immediately use. That's one of the things that we talked about with that 2d12 with that color matrix, being like, rolling on these three colors still leaves me in rolling on those three tables to create a random color still leaves me in a situation in which I still have to think up a random color. So it's actually, all it is narrowing the choices that I need to do, but it's not actually getting me to the final step that I need to be much faster. And I still have to do that work in my brain. So I'm like, okay, so that failed. So becoming the 2d12 table, being like, oh, that gives me a specific color I can use immediately. So something that gives me something like that. The monster preoccupation, I can tell you what they're doing now. The hazard, I can tell you what that hazard is now. Same thing with the traps, same thing with wilderness dressing. What do you come across? Roll the dice. This is what you come across. Needs to be simple and quick to use. So that was one of the other things that it failed on, where it's like I have to roll 3 different tables and interpret all those tables together, as opposed to this, which the most difficult one would probably be, or the most complex one I should say, is probably the trap table. Honestly, you don't have to roll improvise traps all that much. But even that, like I said, the other two are very easy because it's just, does this trap reset at any point, or is it a one and done? That's one of the tables, so that's all I need to know. So that's actually doesn't have any mechanical importance when the trap first comes up, only after it's gone off. And then the other one is just how is it activated, which is going to be an important thing to know. And then table by itself, or if I already know how there's an activation, like maybe I've already decided, because I improv that off my head, where it's like, oh, you guys were going down the hallway, oh, you failed this perception check, up, you hear something click beneath your boot, so I'm already like, all right, I already used the stupid pressure plate thing. It's activation instead of using one of the random ones. So I went with the tried and true, you know, you step on something and you hear a click and it depresses under your foot, or an interaction, which is like, hey, you went and screwed around with the chest and tried to open it or unlock it, and in doing so, you triggered the trap, which is an interaction. And then, so the only other thing I have to roll is, what's the trap actually do? And so that's what I'm actually rolling for. It's like, okay, what does it do though? So that's number 2. It needs to be simple and fast to use. It needs to produce something I can immediately use. And number 3, it's going to inspire me rather than constrain me. So it gives me this idea. I think that is hopefully very clear as I was going through some of these. Be like, it gives me an idea of something, but it doesn't mean it can only be that thing. Like I said, a good example of that was the pool or pond in the dilapidated warehouse. This would be like, oh, well, it's weird for a pond to be there, but I just need a body of water. And it's like, okay, well, maybe like this is like set out on piles out technically beyond the pier or wherever it is, or there's just a sewer beneath it or whatever it is, or river runs underground river runs beneath it, whatever it is. All it matters is that there's water there now. So it gives me the ability to inspire that rather than being like, no, it can only be a lake, and it can only have a boat or a bridge across it. You're like, okay, well, that's not going to work in a lot of circumstances. I can't use that in a lot of dungeons. Because most are not going to make sense to have that in it. But almost any dungeon will make sense to have some form of water, or we can always swap out water for lava very easily. Be like, oh yeah, there's like a magma river that flows through here. Like you're in part of an old like magnet, like lava tube, and you're going through that, and like, oh, there is this sort of like furrow of like molten stone that's moving past. It's like you're still gonna need to get across it, and maybe there's a bridge across it. Maybe there's not. Maybe there's some stuff that people have laid across it just to try to make it, or maybe they've rolled some sort of big boulder or something into the middle of it, so there's kind of like hopscotch your way across it. So the idea is that it's going to inspire me to create something and not constrain me to be. It can only be this one thing. Another good example of that was the monster preoccupation table that I showed off. Where it's like, yeah, there's like one clear thing, like food was one of the ones we just rolled, which would include drinks as well. Food and drinks. Kind of shortened to food for space limitations. He was like, okay, it just means they're interacting with food. That's why we have all those other things where we can get more specific. Are they brewing tea or beer or whatever? Are they making some sort of drink? Are they cooking food? Are they cleaning utensils or cookware after they've already eaten? Are they actively in the process of eating? Like, what are they doing? Are they baking bread? That can include baking bread. It could be anything. Just like they are doing something with food. Here are some ideas about some specific things they could be doing that is related to food. And you might go, oh, well, maybe they're growing food. But there's actually a different area that would work in better, which is the area where they just there's one that's just called work. They're doing work. That could be some sort of like administration duties. They could be doing some sort of guard duties. They could be doing labor, or they could be doing some sort of skilled trade, and giving us those options. So the idea, again, to inspire instead of constrain. So it'd be like, oh no, they are specifically drinking tea. Like, nope, that's just one of the things they could be doing. Just really kind of getting me to a point where it's like, it's doing 90% of the work, and then I only have to do like that last little touch-up job at the end. Try to get it over the hump into being something very useful for me. That's number 3. So, in all, we have produces something you can immediately use. You want something that's simple and fast to use, so it's not something that's going to really bog down your game. So whether that's looking it up, so really only keeping, by having something like this is my DM binder. Most people have a binder. Mine's a folder. It really only has the stuff that I genuinely use pretty often. And even this has some cruft in it that I could probably clean up. Has some chaff that I could remove now. Is now that I've used this for years now, I'm like, oh, there's still some stuff in here that I don't really use, or stuff that I've handwritten in here that I need to transfer into just being fully typed up. Make it a little bit easier to use. And the 4th criteria is that it has to fit your style. That's the whole point, is it needs to be personalized to you. So there are going to be lots of tools and aids that you can find that are going to seem like a great idea on paper, but you'll find out that you don't use them all that often. So This thing is chock-a-block with some of that stuff. Like, there's lots of stuff, like I just said. There's stuff in here that, you know, made sense to me when I was putting it together. And then after I've used this Dungeon Master, a little binder aid, for a while, I've been like, man, do I never use this stuff. And it's either I don't remember to use it, or I'm like, oh, it's not super useful for the situations that I thought it was going to be. Yeah, let me see if I can show you an example. That'll be easier. Let me show you an example of one. Let's see. I could probably show you. Oh, there's one that I want to use a lot more, but I always forget to use because it's hard for me to remember it for whatever reason. I don't know, it's the position of where it is in the DM binder, or I just need to make a note when I'm doing my prep to be like, hey, do the thing. And maybe it needs to be more of a Dungeon Master 2 binder resource instead of Dungeon Master 1 binder resource. And that is well, where is it? NPCs, you know, countdown timer, doing a session sheet. Is it in here? Yeah, it's not that one. I can't imagine that, right? Yeah. It's under goods and services. Is it under exploration? No. Where the heck is this thing? Nope. This one? Oh gosh, I'm just gonna have to search for it. I don't know where this thing is. Okay. Nope, that doesn't. That's referencing it. That's not actually the thing. The same thing here. That's funny. Where is this thing? Oh, it must be under something else. Alright. There are other things I could show you, but I think that this one is probably the best example, which is why I want to do it, because it's actually a really good table. Like, it's actually a really good resource. I just don't ever use it enough. Okay, I think I know where it is. Ah, I found it. Funny me, I should have looked at the bottom where I left a footnote that tells me the name of the actual document. That's old me looking out for the current me, but current me being too dumb to listen to old me. All right, here we go. So it's the What's Happening in Town table, which is this really beautiful big table that's super lovely. It's really great whenever I use it. I just constantly forget to use it when I'm at the table. And often, honestly, the thing that one of the things is when I remember it, it's still unlikely to come up because it's still like a 1 in 12 chance that something that you even roll on this table, which I think I need to adjust them. I think I want to make sure that something's happening every time that they go to a place the first time, and then after then consider whether I'm going to reroll for it. Because 1 in 12 is not a lot. That's like, right, that's less than 10% of the time. That's what, like 8% of the time ish, something like that. So let's see if they were visiting this place. How many times would it take for this to actually come up? We'll say if they roll 12. Oh, well, there we go. All right, so I wouldn't roll on it till the 4th time they came back to the settlement. Now remember that depending on how you run your games, they might come back to the settlement once, twice, even thrice within the same game session. So there is a chance that you might roll it up. So, you know, just for fun, we'll roll twice, a 6 and a 20, and we'll take whichever one feels the best. All right, so 6 would be, hey, there's a market fair or tournament day. You walk in, there's like a big market that's going on, or a big fair, which is even big, like a market exponentially sized, where lots of people are there. Or it could be some sort of tournament they're having. And then, or you can do 20, that there's some sort of strange creature that's been sighted in the area. So they've found some sort of angel or celestial. They've identified some sort of like, there's been like a Bigfoot Mothman sighting. Just like a cryptid monster being like, well, I saw this weird thing. There is, you could have seen a fae or a fiend or maybe some undead, probably a ghost, but not always a ghost. Or maybe they've seen a witch or a crone in the woods. Just kind of give them this idea about like, hey, what are people talking about in town? Like, what's going on? So market days can be hard to pull off if it's like a super small place. Or even sometimes a really large one where you're like, yeah, well, it's a large city. There's probably a market going on almost every single day. And that's if you care about things like having some sort of anachronism to kind of like middle-aged periods in Europe, where it's just like markets are a very specific ordered thing that you have to have a charter for, and it's very weird. You should check it out sometime. There's a number of videos of it on YouTube. There's one I watched just recently. Talking about, actually, no, that was a Max Miller one, but he was referencing something else that I had also seen. Talking about like how weird it is for market days, and you can only buy certain things on certain days from certain people, and very interesting. If you want that in your game, if not. But it can also be weird to do like tournament days for like small villages, because you're like, they're probably not doing like jousting tournaments and stuff like that. But they might have some sort of tournament for, and this could be anything. It could be like they're having a darts tournament or something like that, or like cornhole, some like dumb game like drafts, or Nine Men Morris, like a games tournament day where they're taking all challengers. It might be, you have a thing. This is a little bit more Wild West, but you have like a traveling person who comes in who's got like a prize fighter. It's like, if we'll take all challengers in bare knuckle boxing with our roaming champion, and if you beat them, you get a small purse payout, sort of thing. So nice, easy, fun stuff that you can kind of just throw in there, just kind of like, make it feel like it's a living world, that people are doing stuff and kind of going on, things are happening. Let's again for other fun stuff. So this is a really fun table, but can it produce something I can use immediately? Yes. Is it simple and fast to use? Yeah, pretty much. Does it inspire rather than constrain? Yeah, I think so. And does it fit my style? Yeah, very much. So why am I not using it? Honestly, I forget to, because the opportunity for it comes up rare enough that I forget about it often. So I should probably just change that. That's probably the easiest way to do that. Maybe I'll do something where it's like a roto where I'll build it up. We'll be like, oh, every time that they come back to the place, it builds up. So first time they visit it, it's only 1 on a D12. The next time, if I don't get that and they come back, it's 1 or 2 on a D12. There's 1, 2, 3. So it gives them more likelihood that they will come across stuff the more they interact with these settlements. That way it doesn't always feel like it's a static place that they keep coming back to again and again and again, that doesn't ever have change. It doesn't have anything going on. So I want that stuff. So I just need to alter the way that I think about it. It might also, again, be the positioning. I probably need to move that maybe to some other place in my DM binder, because it's right in the middle of, in between 2 well-used sections. So I'm either flipping to that middle section or the back section. And it's kind of right on the cusp in between those, so I don't utilize it or run across it all that often. All right, I rolled a 5 and a 19. Could be having a funeral. This has come up in the game that I've been running, where they've gone to a place and been like, oh, there's a funeral going on. There's a funeral procession going through the streets. They asked about it and like what's going on. It was a really great way to introduce like, hey, there is this shrine, a big shrine to the Void. Void is world building, custom god. Don't worry about it. Deals with entropy, obviously. And they're headed down towards the docks because they're going to take a boat over to it, because it's on an island by itself off in the bay. So we can do that. Very easy way to introduce things. You show off some of the world building if you have world building for like what religious rites look like. And if there's anything specific about death shrouds or practices or rites that they do for funeral rites or anything like that, you can show off that kind of world building. But it's a great way to like introduce gods or introduce like people who are moving from one place to another. What do people do with their dead? Do you have graveyards? Is everybody cremated? What do you do? And 19 was our other one. A lot of these tables are really, really great for like introducing little world building stuff. 19, tax day. This has also come up. we got 2 of the ones that have come up in the current campaign I'm running. Hey, it's tax day. That means, hey, if you are moving through the streets or coming through the gates, you got to pay a pittance. You got to pay us a little taxi tax for being around. So yeah, no, at a lot of the places, especially like big cities in the homebrew world that I run most games in, there's a gate tax for just about every sort of major city, any kind of burg or big city that you enter. Yeah, you got to pay every time you come in through the gate. Unless you get some sort of notice or you get some sort of license or special privilege where you don't have to pay that anymore. And it's usually per pair of legs or axle. So it depends on your price. So if you're coming in, obviously, you're a human like me or most humanoid ancestries, you are going to have 2 legs, 1 pair of legs, so you pay 1 price. But if you're bringing in a bunch of livestock or you're bringing in horses, guess what? Horses have 2 pairs of legs. And sheeps and dogs and all that, they all have 2 pairs of legs, so you have to pay double the price to bring animals into the city, which makes sense. There's not a lot of space or food or resources for them in there, so they really don't want you to bring this stuff in there unless it's for like a market day. And they could deny you at some point. And then like with my gates, there's like usually a thing about being like, hey, you've got to like piece bind your weapons and you can't be wearing any heavy armor. Weirdos. You can't be walking around with like full like tactical war gear on, like psychopaths. Like you dress like a normal person. You're in a normal city. We don't really want people in here with the medieval equivalent of an assault rifle and tactical black jackets and bulletproof vests on. Like, yeah, we're gonna need you to like put that stuff away. You cannot have that out. So again, great table. Love to use it. Want to use it even more. Sometimes hard to implement at the table. And that's how that goes. So if we take all this and being like, all right, we've got kind of our criteria. It's got to produce something we can use. It's got to be simple and fast. It's got to be something that inspires rather than constrains us. And it has to be something that's going to fit your personal style. And I think that's a lot of the misses are going to be trying to figure out what your style is if you don't already have a good idea of that. And even if you do, like I said, there's plenty of stuff in here, just like that table, where it's like, oh, this is definitely going to be a thing I use. And then be like, this is not a thing I use at all because it doesn't really fit my style, or it just doesn't come up very often. Or it's less useful than I thought it was going to be, which is also very common. One of the things, like I have a D100 market stalls and shops. I'm like, that's true, and I can use that, and I have used it plenty of times before, but I don't use it in the context I thought that I would. This is one of the things where it's like, clearly I lean a little bit more into that verisimilitude, like anachronism, being like, oh, when you go to a market day, there's only certain types of vendors there, and you may or may not be able to find the thing that you want there, and I'm like, that's great, like, in my mind palace, like on paper, that makes a lot of sense. But when you're running Dungeons and Dragons or a game like that, like, oh, if players want to shop to find something, they expect to be able to go to the market and be able to find most things. I'm like, yeah, that does make more, like, it does make more sense. Unless they're asking for specific things, like if they're looking for arms or armor or magical items, these are not the sort of things that are going to be like in an average market day. You're looking for like anything that's on that standard adventuring gear, or would be like normal like trade commodities you can probably find. But it's nice to be like, oh, if there was a specific vendor I want to bring up or use as an NPC, having that chart is still useful to me because that means I can roll on it and give basically a job to that person, which is the primary thing you need to give to any sort of transactional NPC is be like, okay, this most NPCs are defined at their most base level by their ancestry and what kind of job they do, and that's about it. And much more than giving them a name. So I find that stuff. So that D100 table is my names list because I'm like, oh, I just want somebody who can do something, who has a reason to be here, or has a way that they fit into the overall world. Like, how do they become? What puzzle piece are they of the jigsaw? So, but I think that with those 4 things that we're looking for as far as criteria, I do think there are like 5 relatively big buckets that we could throw most tools into. You could have like decision aids. Those are things like anything that makes you help make a choice fast, which is really, really awesome. Oracles, morale rules, roll tables for like combat tactics, like what monsters do in combat. Those kind of tables, things that are like get you away from analysis paralysis, where you're like, or executive dysfunction, where you're like burned down. And you're like, I don't know, I didn't plan for this. We've come up with a weird situation, and I don't know what to do. Man, the moment I got into solo RPGs and started using oracles, and I was like, oh, this is something useful for me as a DM. Be like, oh, it's so much easier to be like, I don't know, I roll a die. If I don't have a clear idea about what that's gonna be, or have any specific reason as to why it should be a yes or why it should be a no, I'm gonna let the dice decide. Super easy, and then I don't have to think about it. Makes life just so much easier. Morale rules as to like when do monsters decide to run away from combat, which you should. I think you should be using morale all the time, as have some sort of way to end combats earlier, either by having them surrender or run away or try to barter or do something, try to force negotiation, try to, once you get to a moment where combat begins to drag, which is about the end of round 3, start of round 4 in most D&D combats, look for some way to get out of the combat. If it's clear who's going to win, once it becomes clear who's going to win, then the like tension of combat kind of fades away. So you might as well try to cut it off as quick as you can, which can be bad guys run away. I have bad guys run away all the time. Means I can get through fights much faster. It also means that I get to kind of put those guys back in the inventory for encounters. Like, oh, these 3 goblins ran away, so they kind of go back into the tank, so I can always maybe pull them out if I need some more goblins in a later encounter or something like that. And I feel like I always use goblins. Let's say they're kobolds. How about that? A different low-level mook of D&D. And take them and put them there. So decision aid's a really good one. Generators, anything that helps you create stuff and make it varied. So that would be things like my traps and hazard tables, anything that helps me generate something very, very quickly. Those are generators. Loot generators, I have some loot tables in there, though my loot tables aren't super fast. The quickest one I have is my 2d6 table, really more of a chart. Chart for pocket contents. Hey, did you have a rogue who likes to pick people's pockets? Here's a 2d6 table for what they found in that person's pocket. So it's just kind of like stuff that people generally have on them, which has been one of the more useful things. It's such a nice table. It really kind of just comes down to 6 categories. It's like some sort of accessory that they have on them. It should be something like clothing or a holy symbol or something like that, jewelry, a dagger, like a weapon, or cudgel or something like that. Something that falls under like EDC, which is everyday carry, which might be something like a knife or like a little pocket lamp or like a little notepad or wax tablet or an instrument or a handkerchief, like anything like that that somebody would just have on them. Another thing would be some sort of food item they have on them. They might have like a penny roll or some candies or like a little pouch of like roasted nuts or something like that they're munching on, some sunflower seeds, things like that. And there's a category that's just items, include things like a flask. They could have a key, which is probably to their home or to some other place. A key is a fun one to give to random party members and be like, cool, you just killed the guy who knew what that key went to, so good luck. But hey, maybe you'll come across what it is, and maybe it does give you the opportunity that like every locked chest they will come across for the next like session or two, that'll be like, oh, I need to try that key to see if it unlocks this thing. And it may or may not, usually not. Other things like incense, if they have some sort of medicine, they might have like a tobacco pouch, something like that. They have a coin purse on them. It's got a certain amount of money in it. Usually coppers or silvers, occasionally gold pieces, and every once in a while, somebody who's got some platinum on them. So that's pretty rare. And then the last category is paper. They've got some sort of paper or document on them. They have a banknote, which is kind of like ye old check. They've got a way that you can go to a place like a mint or a bank and give them this piece of paper. It's kind of like a bearer bond. You can give them this piece of paper and they will give you that amount of money from whoever's account that it's made out from. You have a contract. There's some sort of contract. Directions, a note or list, a map, or some sort of like pass or papers that they use to like get access to a place. So very easy ones. Like that's a really great table. Super easy to use. Helps you generate loot really quickly. But my bigger loot generator is much slower, and those of you who have watched this, you know that it's quite a bit slower on the uptake. So I try not to do that in the middle of the session. Unless you are like us and you've had your main character die in the middle of the session and you have to figure out what to do about that. And so you're looking through magic items and loot to see if like maybe they'll find something that will give them a revive. We didn't. So that is now the main thrust of that campaign. So you should check out our solo RPG. We usually do it on Saturdays. Unless something else happens, we should be doing it this Saturday. And our helpful characters, our sidekick characters, are in a rush to get to a person to be able to revivify our dead main character who got dead in a fight and got substantial damage, got dropped to max HP negative, got killed outright, but has been hit with a little gentle repose scroll. And so now they got 10 days to find somebody who can bring this dude back. Or else, I don't know if the campaign's going to end, but the campaign's definitely going to swerve, take a real big tangent if we can't figure out how to bring him back. There's also some other ways to bring him back, which we're also into. Maybe some extra planar entities that have a vested interest in his, sure, we'll call it success, or him living at least. So if you want to check out that and find out about, it's got this wilderness vibe to it. We're traveling over and he's trying to establish holding his own fief as a newly raised noble. So if that sounds interesting to you in a very different style of D&D, give it a check out. River Part, you can catch up on it. We've got, like 13 sessions of it now that you can catch up on. Yeah, been a lot of fun. Hope to see you there. Other things, so we got procedures, generators, decision aids, a prompt table. That would be something like our solo dark table that we use occasionally. I was going to pull it out, but I don't think I have it with me. Yeah, I do. Also, a holdover from solo RPGs. If you haven't used one of these, you can go get the one from, you can download the solo dark packet from Shadow Dark. Basically, it usually just gives you a noun and a verb. It helps you make stuff up by trying to give you some ideas. Ideate something that's going on. If you need a reason why somebody's doing something, you can roll it on that. If you want to know what the next adventure might be about when you're trying to prep for something, you can roll on that and you can try to figure that out. It just gives you a little nugget of something, of information to kind of glom onto and start to, a little grain of sand in which to spin your pearl of an adventure around. And the last one is like a reference, so something that helps you adjudicate things fast. That's what's in the very front of this guy right here, which is just, hey, here are the rules for conditions and exhaustion, and well, that's all that's on the first page. Oh, the actions you can do in combat, just when you need to look at stuff really quickly. Conditions are a good one, like grapple, or how do you do underwater combat rules. That's a thing that probably doesn't come up very often, but if it comes up often enough, you might want to have a reference for it. So right now I play in a campaign that is heavily underwater, which I don't think anybody was necessarily prepared for, with 2 terrestrial PCs and 1 amphibious. Yeah, I guess we'd say amphibious PC. We were not prepared to we thought it was going to be a maritime sailing campaign. It turns out we are going to spend almost all the campaign underwater. So got to get used to the underwater combat rules real quick. Which, I think that our DM who runs that campaign has taken that decision in stride and done his best, but man, I think he has felt the fatigue of trying to do underwater combat when you always have to consider vertical aspect as part of your encounter. The Z-axis is not always fun in D&D, especially in the ocean, where it's like people are just you're basically just doing flying combat all the time. With all the pros and cons of that, primarily the cons, especially as a dungeon master. So I thought when I sat down, I was like, okay, so I've got this criteria and I've got this list. And then I thought, okay, there are a number of tools that are probably the most useful for any dungeon master or game master, especially for a new dungeon master or game master. And I thought, what are the things that I wish that I had access to when I was first starting out? What are the things that I think I could do much, much better now? And I thought, okay, I think any sort of some sort of NPC table of some sort that gives you NPC details, or gives you physical details, or gives you some sort of mannerisms or something about their personality to kind of help you step into playing that NPC very quickly and easily, as well as, depending on who you are, probably a name list. Very easy to come up with. Having that all as sort of like one reference sheet that I think would be incredibly useful for a new dungeon master or game master. It is still something like, I have so much stuff about NPC details. I do not have them consolidated in a single reference document. I should probably do that, but most NPCs in D&D or whatever TTRPG you're running are transactional. They really don't exist beyond whatever this specific interaction you're having with them, with the PCs is. Usually they're telling them about some sort of rumor, or are witness to something that has happened, or they're doing some sort of transaction like buying something at the market, or getting a room at the inn, or asking them about some other NPC that you've already planned. Most of the time you don't really need a lot of that stuff. But still, it's nice to have it when those NPCs become recurring, like there's somebody that the had to go back to again and again when you have kind of improvised an NPC. And I think we've all had that at one point where you improvise an NPC and that becomes like the party's favorite NPC, and you're like, oh, okay, so I guess every time that we have that recurring NPC, I need to add a little bit more depth to them to make them a little bit more well-rounded. Having those things that kind of give you those details and aspects and mannerisms can help you build that up very quickly. But it's not necessarily something that you need to run every single NPC. So that's the second one, is having some sort of like secret, or having some sort of like, I guess the first one, NPC details and name lists. The second one would be secrets, clues, and rumor generator, something that lets you come up with that kind of stuff pretty quickly. Again, I think that the prompts, something like this, is really the greatest way to do that. You can usually get them. This is technically 2 pages that we've shrunk down into one spread. Super easy. It's 2D100 tables, very easy to roll on. And it can give you that stuff pretty quickly. You will have to do a little bit of legwork. It's not going to spit something perfectly out to you, but it's going to get you like 80% of the way there. And then you just have to figure out how those 2 words relate to this one specific situation you're in. Another one would be like the description framework. Like, how do you describe primarily a scene or a location? and not a location as in a dungeon or a mountain or a city, but like this specific room, like an encounter set piece. I like the Angry GM framework. I've used it for a long time. I think it's one of the easiest ways and to very quickly boil down a scene to its very specific descriptive parts with a focus on what is the most important thing in the description that you are giving the piece. Basically, you start with a basic idea like, hey, this is a graveyard. You describe some interesting aspects about that, being like, oh, it's an old graveyard. You see dead trees whose branches stick up like crooked fingers at the dark sky above, the dark gray sky above, and a number of the like headstones are tilted and off to the battered and haven't been well taken care of. Then you focus in a little bit more. Okay, here's the specific thing that we want to focus on that scene, because you want to save that for the last, because whenever you introduce whatever that thing is going to be, usually it's going to be the monster. The thing that players are going to go, oh, you want to save that for the last, because usually when you're describing a scene, if you describe, oh, and there's zombies, and then you continue to describe other things, the players stop listening and start looking at their character sheets about like what they're going to do about the zombies. So you want to save the zombies sort of like for the end, but if you're like, oh, and you see a partially dug up grave, and that's kind of the focus of the scene, so you're going to do that, and then at the end be like, as you guys are taking a look at this, you start to hear the moaning and shuffling of undead begin to come into focus from the fringe of your vision, coming in from for other parts of the graveyard towards you. That way, okay, now there's the combat, but remember that there's the dug up grave that is the focus of the scene, because that's where we're going to get our clue or next part of the puzzle or whatever we're trying to figure out here. I think that's a very useful one to have, and it's like a 4 or 5 step process. It's super simple. Like, you get to the point when you just kind of do it rote, so much that I don't really think about them as like independent steps anymore. I'm like, okay, you start on the outside, you kind of give details, and then you get to the specific thing, and then you tell them if there's a threat in the room, what the threat is. It's very, very straightforward. I would highly encourage you to go check it out. Angry GM, you can go find his blog online. It's been around for a long time. But how to build descriptions of a scene. Some sort of encounter building framework. I've got my own. We've talked about it previously on the channel. We don't really need to go over it again, but something that tells you about like, okay, how many monsters do I add? Like what size? Beyond something like Kobold Fight Club or something like that is going to do like the CR, but also like, all right, how do I introduce things like terrain? How do I introduce aspects of like hazards? Are there hazards just for one type of creature, for all types of creatures in the scene? What happens if I put water in here? What if I make difficult terrain? How do I add impassable terrain? How do I add verticality to a fight? What if I add a mezzanine section or a stairwell that goes up to some place, or something they can interact with in the scene? What if there are bookshelves or a big table they can flip over, or a chandelier that they can cut down, and or a fireplace that's got a roaring fire in it, or whatever? Have those sorts of aspects that you can add stuff into. Whereas, well as like types of encounter, I think 4th edition was really good at that. Being like, oh, there's like a frontline backline formation, or a pack formation, which is a whole bunch of the same type of creature, like a horde. Or there is like a commander and soldiers situation where you have like one leader, healer, hobgoblin. Like hobgoblins are really good. Like a hobgoblin captain working with some goblins is a really good example of that. Or they usually have some sort of like inspiring thing that they can do that can give like the goblins like an extra d4 on their attack rolls, in addition to their pack tactics. Makes the goblins suddenly become really, really good at hitting people than otherwise they wouldn't be able to. And how do I build things, just like we were talking about with the warehouse, building choke points, building areas? How do you figure out how PCs and characters can move through the scene? Index Card RPG, it's on the shelf behind me, is really good. It's got, I think it's like 7, I think it's more than 7. And it gives you these different, almost like football sports diagrams about like how to lay out an encounter, a pinch encounter, or a thing that like utilizes cover in a weird way, or gives you this ability of like there's one safe passageway and then a bunch of hazardous terrain. So that's a very easy way to jump in and kind of like learn some of that stuff, having those kinds of things that allow you to build those things very quickly and build very, maybe formulaic, but very well, or templated is probably a better word, but very well like defined things. It's not just like PCs on one side, monsters on one side, blank room, and they just run and smash into each other until one of the sides just dies. Try to give you that kind of stuff. Again, that's also working in things like morale, stuff like that. As you get deeper and deeper into it, as you become more confident and comfortable in running games, and especially running combat encounters, you can start adding more stuff in and figure out how do you make it faster. Morale's a great way to make it faster. Lowering the CR budget and just having more fights is also another way to make combats faster. And the last thing that I would say is drop in something that's like a quest generator, some way to generate quests. Which is, and like I've got the what I call the old Questomatic. I will pull. I bet I can find the Questomatic. I'll show you a Questomatic. I shared it with one of my friends who's running a heavily modified 5e game to make it Pokemon. But there is. This is close. Not the like. Oh, you know what? I think it's in. Sorry, I'm just looking. There's the Questomatic. So this is a great example. It showcases like how I build the resources. So this is a so this is a 50-page document, by the way. Not the Questomatic. The Questomatic is a very small portion of this, but let's show it off real quick. But this is my adventure builder. So this is the resources that I use, like a consolidated resource that I use to build adventures. And it's a 51-page document. You do not need that. I do that because I'm always trying to keep things like fresh, and I'll fall into the same traps again and again, and do the same stuff over and over. But doing something like the Questomatic, like I said, my friend who's running a Pokemon, heavily homebrewed Pokemon themed 5e game that we're playing in, I gave him this because he needs to make like Pokemon. He needs to make a lot of like tiny like side quest kind of stuff for a TTRPG like that, or a TTRPG version of a game like that. So this is the easy Questomatic. Good way to make a basic adventure plot quickly. Powerful tool for developing simple side quests and short adventures. That's kind of the go-to. You have a D8 task. You need to do something here. This formatting sucks. I need to reformat this. But that's okay. So you roll a D8. You know what? We'll just do it. How about that? All right. So we need an 8, 8, and a 4. I'll show you how it rolls real quick. All right, 5, 7, 3. All right, so we need to take some sort of fantastic thing, probably a magic thing, after something. So there's going to be an opportunity. We have to wait. We have to prepare for an opportunity to do something. Once that thing happens, we have to grab that thing. So this might be like once it's in transit, or maybe a good way to do this is like if we wanted to do a if we want to make this a very simple fetch quest, this is like, oh, you need the specific moonflower with all its magical resources, and so you have to grab this thing, but only after the moon rises or after the full moon or something like that, and that would be more of a during or while, but you can only find it during the nighttime. Put it that way. So after the sun goes down, you can only find it after the sun goes down. So it kind of gives you this way to look at something and be like, okay, so I need to make this quest real quick. That's what the quest is. Here's some different rewards, nice D20 rewards. But that's the quest. We know what to do. Then we just add some monsters into it, and bada bing, bada boom, we've got an adventure. And if you do this, we'll give you access to a person. Nice to have a rewards chart that's not just like you get money, especially in D&D 5th edition 5.5, where money's practically useless after a certain level. So access to a person. So, oh, I've got the ear of, I don't know, this major merchant that's in the nearby city. Something that's, you play off of something else that's probably already going on in the campaign. Or something that's kind of stymied them for a while and be like, oh, we need to talk to this person. No, but that person doesn't talk to just anybody because maybe PCs aren't of a level where they have enough social credibility to talk to that person just open. They can't just knock on their front door and be seen by this person. Be like, oh, well, yeah, I know that because that's, I don't know, like my brother-in-law or something like that. Be like, oh, yeah, you can go see my sister, and through my sister, you can see my brother-in-law. After you do this for me, I will give you like a little letter of introduction or something like that, even though I think that might be on here. Nope, it's not. Good. I can give you like a little letter of introduction. Oh, we had examples down here. 782, prevent the Hobgoblin Castle from using its catapults during the besieging army's assault. Super good one. Easy one. Enter a warlock's mind to prevent the daemon from stealing its true name from the warlock's memory. Allows you to get pretty weird with it. A wildfire is encircling a forest village and threatens to burn it to the ground. Do your best to save the village and its people from a fiery fate. Boom. Done. Very easy to kind of do this. So, yeah, having something like that as a new DM, I had to build this thing, but and that makes it sound like I did a lot of work. Didn't actually. There was I found a super old like World of Warcraft forum board that was discussing like how Radiant quests are kind of created in World of Warcraft, and probably 80% of this is ripped from that, with some differences in changing some things for expansions off of other resources and stuff that I added to it over the years working on it. But yeah, it's very, I think that would be a super useful thing, because I think that's one of the hard things to do as a new Dungeon Master, to figure out how to keep coming up with new, fresh adventures. So that's one of the ones that I would look at. So with those 5 things, so that's the NPC details, the secrets, clues, and rumor kind of generator, how to describe scenes, the encounter builder, building information, or a quest generator. With those, any new Dungeon Master or Game Master would be able to create a quest idea, be able to describe all the adventure areas and the specific locations within them. You would be able to detail all the major NPCs that are part of that adventure, villains, patrons, sidekicks, allies, villain lieutenants, whatever. You'd be able to note any secrets, clues, and rumors. You'd be able to add those in that the PCs can encounter in their mid-adventure, and then be able to generate the like really competently designed adventures for that, or competently designed combat encounters for that adventure. That is a very easy way, with just 5 things that you can go, especially for a new Dungeon Master, to be like, here's a way to do all that. Now, lots of those sort of like pre-built resources already exist, and you can find many of those, and that would be my advice to you, is to go grab those and then hack them apart and tailor them to your specific style of play, things that you want. If you never want to do things like a flower picking adventure, don't have that in there, because you're never going to want to run that. So know that that's what you want to do. If you're not the sort of like person who wants to run a lot of like masquerade scenes, if you have things that are like a big social adventures, that's one of the things you can get. You'll be like, well, I actually don't want to do that, so I'm actually going to remove that as an option. I'll find something else to fill in the blank with. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this one out. We've gotten through most of this, but I do want to come back and talk about a little bit more we'll talk about a couple more, I think, of my personalized tools, and then kind of talk about some other different types of tools that you might want to think about getting for yourself, and then we'll probably close this one out. But I'm going to take a break, but before I do, I want to leave you kind of guys with a question, something to mull over while I go refill my coffee and do all that. So think about the things that we've talked about. Think about the 4 different criteria that we talked about. It's like, oh, we want to do something that's going to give us something that we can use at the table really quick, something that's fast and easy to use, something that is not going to constrain us but give us inspiration. And oh gosh, what was the 4th criteria? I'm gonna lose my mind. Oh, it fits your personal style, of course. Of course, it fits my personal style. It's all my stuff that I've built. So, keeping those 4 kind of points of criteria in your mind, think about what parts of dungeon mastering or game mastering do you feel like you currently struggle with the most? What tool or aid can you think of that you can imagine would help you do that better? Or help shore up some of that weakness, some of the stuff that you're not great at. For me, perfect example, that 2d12 chart for colors. Like, man, I have learned that I am not the greatest at improvising colors. Here's a simple table I can use to improvise colors. Boom, done. And now it spent me, it took some time to make it. I'm not gonna lie, it took some time. Mostly it was getting the colors. Not actually building the table. Building the table was easy, but it was finding all the codes for the colors. That was the thing that took this amount of time. But think about what that kind of aid would be. While you do that, I'm gonna go refill up on my coffee. I'll be back in a second. All right, we got back. We'll come back because you definitely left. I left. I'm sure you left. Didn't. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about some of my personalized, a few more of my personalized tools, and then we're going to go to sort of wrapping this one up. We'd already took a look at the Questomatic. We did not look at the random plot seeds, which is right above it. Go ahead and look at that. Which is this guy up here, which is like the 60 basic story plots. You can go find these on your own. You don't necessarily need them from me. But what I like is I like to combine some of them together. It gives a little bit more texture to an adventure, but these are like archetypal or archetypical, like basic story plots. Like so many stories are gonna have this going on in them. There's about 60 of them, and you can take them. It goes everything from adultery all the way down to war. And they come up so often that we can make lists about them. So these are things that are consistent pretty much across media and across time for media that you will find these. Pretty much every story that you can read will probably fall into at least one of these, if not most of them. Even like even something like House of Leaves, which I would probably say is conflict with extraplanar creature as well as some other stuff that's going on. And or madness. And then I have some examples here because sometimes I like to put 3 together. I think 3 is a pretty good number. It will make a pretty dense plot though. So if you're interested in running a very dense plot adventure, you can add some of these together. If that's not really your thing, or you're a newer Dungeon Master or Game Master starting out, probably start with like 1, maybe 2. Then work your way up to adding 2 together and see them kind of transition across. So in this one we have 11, 9, and 56. Deliver an unmarked package to a person being held captive in a tall dungeon under strict surveillance. Fail and a fate worse than imprisonment awaits. So that was 11. We can figure out what these components are. Delivery. Simple enough. 9, a daring enterprise. Right, you have to break into the place. And 56, surveillance. That's the aspect. So kind of putting those together can give you a very strong thing. So this is more of a kind of a weird like reverse heist. We're actually trying to deliver something inside an area rather than get something out of it. So it's more of a twist on a heist. Fun. 58, 39, and 12. Patron is crippled with misfortune after unintentionally releasing a cruel fae from its silver snuff box prison. The creature can only be returned to the vessel after being exhausted in the gauntlet of guile, wit, and games. So that was 58, which is victim of cruelty or misfortune. That's our patron. 39, Pandora's box, a literal box prison. So we're using that. So we let something nasty out of. 12 is diplomacy, right? You have to do these games of guile and wit and a battle of wits with a fey creature, a very sort of like Bilbo and Gollum kind of showdown, a riddle master kind of thing, to do that and get them back exhausted enough that you can kind of force them to get back into their little prison. Or at least force them to leave if you don't want to re-imprison them. And then 33, 14, and 47, a village looks like it was at the center of a forceful blast. No casualties. The inhabitants are suffering from various degrees of amnesia. The sheriff has found a portion of arms and armor recently stolen in transit and has hit a dead end in interrogating the villagers. So there's somebody who's like, hey, sheriff or constable or whatever you want to call them, the person, a guard captain, etc., has come out here and been like, hey, we found some of the stolen goods and here, but I asked all the villagers and the villagers don't know anything. And depending on how you play this, you might be like the sheriff is real hard-nosed and be like, no, they're obviously just all in on it and they're lying to me. They're protecting somebody, whoever did it. Or could be very sympathetic and be like, I don't know what's going on. I'm stuck in this strange place where it's like I have to enforce the law. You know, I have the nobility breathing down my neck that I need to bring these people to justice, but I can't for the life of me figure out what to do in this situation, because otherwise I'm just punishing people who seem relatively innocent because they don't know what happened. So 33 is obviously missing memory. 14 is disaster, so that's our blast. And 47, which is resistance. So we got a reason as to why they might have been stealing those arms and armor. But in doing so, maybe there was a spell that was protecting it that went off and it blasted them, or it didn't work correctly. So it kind of gives you this idea, if you start throwing a couple of these together, 2 or 3 of these together, that you can have a very interesting plot that's happening. And none of these are like weird twists for the most part. Like, that's kind of overplayed often as a dungeon master, game master, to have like a midway adventure twist where it's like, oh, the thing that you thought was right is not right. More like, oh, there's actually, it's just very, this is, instead of creating a twist, you're creating just like a layered cake effect where you're like, oh, this is more than just a very simple thing. There's actually just multiple things going on at the same time. That as really great if you are the sort of dungeon master or game master who likes to run specifically like an investigation kind of focused game. So if you like things that are games that are in the Call of Cthulhu space, or interested in doing things where there's a lot of mystery and trying to like figure out what's going on, these can be really good for that. Because usually there's a lot of gaps that the players are going to need to fill in, because I would love to run any of these. I have never run any of these adventures, but I'd like to run most of these. I might not want to run this one because I think a gauntlet of guile, wit, and games for a group that's playing D&D they might not be super into. And maybe more so today. If you had a group that was a lot more of sort of had a lot more of that theater kid energy, who were not as concerned with like dungeon delving and doing a whole bunch of combat stuff, they might really enjoy like guile and wit and games and a very, very heavy RP adventure where that's very important, as opposed to where it's slaying dragons and rescuing princesses or whatever. So a very different style of game, but also still very, very fun. So yeah, that's one of the things that I like. I've used for a long time. Let's look at the random dungeon. So this, I believe, also includes a modified Questomatic. It does not. All right, I gotta close some tabs. Yes, yes, yes. It is this one. Great. Okay. There we go. We'll throw it over here. All right, so this is kind of a dungeon creation guide. There's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into it about like, this is one of these documents that I meant that is kind of like audience facing. So it's not just a for me kind of thing, but it does give you kind of the idea as to build up 3 different types of that. It focuses on like, how do you make the dungeon creators, the 3 common types of dungeons or archetypes of dungeons. It's either complex, which is a place where people live and work. There is natural structure, that's our caves, that can be insides of monsters, blah, 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 blah. Or a vault, which is a place that's actually 2 flavors, which is a haven or a prison. So it's either meant to keep something on the inside safe from the outside world, or something keep the outside world safe from the thing that's on the inside. That would be a prison, or it would be a haven or a vault. You know, who made this dungeon? Dungeon creation questions about like who they are, what were they doing here, how did they build this thing to the thing, what is this dungeon purpose for? You know, is it a home, a settlement, a fortress, a temple, manufacturing, production, and resource gathering facility, a vault of some type, a crypt, and some sort of research location? Roll twice and combine, always a fun one. And then dungeon inhabitants, because whoever built this place might not be, or people who were originally here might not still be here. This gives you an idea that maybe have like multiple blocks or factions within the dungeon, which is always a lot of fun to play around with. If you want to get into like, you have the type of players who are interested in like turning one faction against another. It's not, I feel like not everybody plays D&D that way. It's very, I mean, old school has a lot of that stuff, like OSR stuff has very focused on that. Keep on the Borderlands is perfect, like probably the golden example of that, is that you go into the caves and there's all sorts of factions in the caves, and you can get them, some of them like each other, some of them don't like each other, and you can get them to kind of work against each other for your benefit. Who's in it? What happened to the creators if they're not in it? What's the condition of the dungeon? Is it pristine? Is everything in working order? This is primarily how I choose how many traps I put in a dungeon as opposed to hazards in a dungeon. That's when we talk about the HOT framework. That's hazards, obstacles, tricks, and traps. If things are in really pristine condition, there's probably no hazards. It's all going to be tricks and traps. If we are then into the fully ruined version and be like, nope, then there are no tricks and traps that are still operating. They might still be there, but that's when we get into things. You might have seen it on our hazard table that we looked at earlier, which is like a permanent spell effect or something that's not a trap that's not working correctly. It's a really great way to do that is be like, oh, there is this trap. Like if we went back and did the that skull that has the red eyes that steals hit dice. Well, maybe that's not working correctly and it's doing something it's otherwise not supposed to. Maybe it's instead, maybe there's a bunch of bones scattered all over the place, and like every time that it hits a person, maybe instead of stealing the hit die or whatever, it does a little bit of damage to them and instead raises up all these bones that are in here as skeletons, warriors that come and fight the party. Like they're clearly not supposed to work this way, or something like that. Could be fun. Yeah, completing the dungeon setup, all this kind of stuff. This goes in, there's 24 pages of this. We're not going to go through all. But it kind of gives you an idea of it, like, oh, talking about 5-room dungeons, about why it's different, how big should your dungeon be, when you're creating a dungeon, thinking about how long do you actually want to play in the dungeon, as the idea of how large you should make the dungeon. 4.5 rooms serves as a pretty good approximation for the amount of dungeon progress that an average D&D party makes in about a 3 or 4 hour game. So you can use that as a good rule of thumb, as well as 5th editions. This has probably changed a little bit. 5.5, I wrote this some time ago. Is that every 18 dungeon chambers or so, you should get a level up. So you can decide, do you want them to level up in this dungeon? If the answer is yes, you should probably put about 18 in there, unless they've already got XP. If they've already been at the level for a little bit, you probably don't need to put as much. The thing about going in mega dungeons and then like how do you stock the dungeons and all this. So very long, complicated thing. How do you make the dungeon sizes, obstacles that are going in there, tricks and traps that we've already looked at. This is pretty much carbon copy, not quite the same, but very close. What goes in those chambers, the reason that I don't use puzzles, and I talk about that again here as to why puzzles aren't included in this. Types of treasure, pocket contents. There's the pocket contents table. 6 broad categories that we already talked about. Treasure amounts, different types of treasure, if you want to give them out material goods, which if you've seen us do the solo RPG, we're using all these same tables the same way. Where the treasure's at and how it is, how you can find it. Invisible treasure, it's hidden somewhere, it's disguised. All sorts of fun stuff. Dungeon dressing extras. I love dungeon dressing. Probably one of my favorite tables that I have created. Not exactly this one. The one that I have in this guy is a little bit more robust. It's still 20 things, but it's still a little bit different. But man, it is probably one of my more well-used tables. I love using it. Yeah. It's slightly different and more robust. Like a whole thing. Actually, you know what? I think I've got it in here. We can just look at it. That's actually a good transition point. Let's just look at it. You don't need to keep looking at the dungeon creation stuff. You guys know what dungeons are. And let's find your contents. Spider update. That. That's the one. Ah, here it is. The dungeon dressing. Another one of my favorite ones. So find these tools that are super useful for me. And this is one of the ones that I love the most. I don't use it as much when I'm improvising, when I'm running it, unless I'm running a pre-made adventure, which is sometimes doesn't have a lot of dungeon dressing on it, depending on what kind you're in. Especially if you're like me and you're using something like the parachute file, and so you're running a 1-page adventure. Not a lot of space to add stuff in. They're really leaning on you as a dungeon master with something like that. They're like, we're going to give you the bare bones of of this adventure. And you need to kind of improv all the the meat and flesh around it. So this is when I would pull out something like that. So let's say we rolled into an area. Let's say, you know what? We haven't done one of these. So let's say it's a vault, some type. Let's say it is, what is this room about? Maybe this room had, let's, for fun, let's say it's a puzzle room. It's got a puzzle door in it. You have to figure out the puzzle to get through the door. Roll twice. Take whichever one we like the better, or smash them together if we can do that. 9 and 18. 9 was a sensory foreshadow of future danger. So at that point, I would look at something that's like, hey, what's behind that puzzle door? Is there some sort of sensory, like a smell, a sound, some sort of effect? Like one of the ones I'll jump to very clearly is like, if there's a trap in this room that maybe does something like acid or fire, it'd be like, oh, you see the walls are like pockmarked in a strange way. To be like, oh, it's been burned away by acid, or you see black soot that's like cut across it, and you can like get it on your fingers and look at it and be like, oh, well, there's probably something that's gonna jump in and like give a lot of flame. And the other one was 18. That's surprisingly clean or dirty. So you might have something that's like, oh, it's something that makes it stick out from normally. So if we had this entirely like soot covered room, we'd be like, oh, that's surprisingly dirty. No other room is like this. So, I wonder what that could mean. Take a look at that and be like, oh, Gonna give you a foreshadowing of what might be happening. So if there's a trap in the room, you're gonna want to detail that trap. And this foreshadowing is sometimes referred to as telegraphing, especially in OSR stuff, where danger is not always at a scale that the party can handle. And so it's very important to telegraph danger. Be like, hey, give them an idea that there is something big and nasty in here. That way it doesn't catch them by surprise. So but by the time that they actually come across it and kind of have to interact with it, they should already know it exists at this point. They should be well aware. Or they have blown through all stop signs and just done their own thing, because players are like that sometimes. Sometimes they'll do that. So that's a good one. And then I want to show off like one more, I think. So let's look at, my D100 table. I love this guy. Another one of my favorites. I'm just showing off my favorites, my greatest hits. So this is a D100 NPCs. Just when I need a random NPC or something. Like I said, most NPCs are really only a combination of two things: their ancestry and what they do for a living, for the most part. For super low level, like transactional NPCs. Obviously, you'll build more onto that, but do a D100, roll twice, and take whichever one we like the best. 47 and 19. Usually I only roll once on this table because I really only need it. Usually, actually, we'll do this usually how I do that. I'll usually roll once, and then if I don't like it, I'll just switch the numerals. So we'll look at 47. If I don't like 47, I'll just switch it and be like, what's 74 instead? So, wrong one. So we can look at 47. 47, I know this is going to be a little small for you guys, so I'll just read them out. Butcher, fishmonger, or grocer. So somebody who might be working at like a market very easily. If I was like, oh, maybe they're at, let's say that they're at some sort of not low level, like a higher level, like social function, like a gala or something like that. I don't know. I'm just pulling something out of my butt. So a gala or something like that. I'd be like, well, a butcher, a fishmonger, or a grocer might make sense, but they're going to be like wait staff probably there, as opposed to somebody, unless they're really in charge of like really, really important for some reason. What's 74? Ethnic minority leader. That's a lot easier to play. Like, oh, there is a minority, let's say elf population here, and this is sort of the person who is, kind of seen as a tastemaker in that very specific circle of people. They can step in and be like, oh, there is over here one of the people who's kind of considered like socially like a leader of the elves. They don't hold like a very specific political or bureaucratic position, but this is a person who has a lot of They're like a VIP. They have a lot of soft power in the area, so you can introduce them somebody like that. So very easy to kind of create those NPCs on the fly. So obviously there will be a reason that basically any adventurer would want to maybe talk to somebody of power like that, get their influence on their side. And let's roll a different situation for fun. Let's say that we're going through the dungeon and there is somebody, we come across some cells and somebody's locked up down there. Who is this? 97. Still click on the wrong. I think I can close that. Don't need that one. Ooh, a magical talking animal or item. I do love this one when it comes up. Perfect. Totally makes sense why they would be locked up in some sort of like dungeon cave. You find, and let's make it like a rabbit. Just a coney with a shackle around its foot, around its rabbit's foot. And they're like, why? What? You guys seen this? Like, why'd they lock up a rabbit? And then the rabbit starts talking to him. They're like, oh, that's probably why. This is probably, they're like, yeah, you're obviously a polymorphed person. And that may or may not be true. We can always make that up later if we need to. But let's say we wanted to go the other way. We could go hermit or shut in. Between those two, that would be 79. I would almost always take a magical talking animal or item. Could be an item too, if they were in a vault or a treasury or something like that. There are so many D&D swords and objects that talk to people that have personalities. Very easy one to throw in there. Lots of fun. I think it'd be fun to do something monstrously powerful and devastating, like a deck of many things, and then have it have a personality, and constantly try to get people to maybe draw from it, or maybe not draw from it. Maybe it just tells people, no, you should definitely not draw from me. It's a really bad idea. Please don't do it. Please put me down. please find a deep hole and chuck me into it. Don't. I should not be around other people. I'm not be around people. I'm awful. Please don't. Please put me away. Please lose me immediately, and then use magic so you can't remember where you put me. All right, that could be its own. Man, that's its own adventure right there. And talking about somebody who has amnesia, get a lead on somebody who's got a powerful magic item, and then you find out that that person doesn't know what they're talking about. You investigate them a little bit and realize that there's been they've had their memory modified or adjusted in some way. And then you do go through the process of undoing that if you're at a level you can do that, and then find out where this item is, and then get the item, and then find out that it's got this personality, and it's like, no, I'm a bad idea. You should put me back where I was. And that would be a very humorous adventure, humorous end to an adventure. We have all sorts of fun stuff in here. We've got buskers and pawnbrokers and smugglers and silversmiths and longshoremen and outlanders and duelists and the owner of a brasserie. All sorts of fun stuff. I really love this table. I use it all the time. It's such a good one. Such a good one. All right. That's enough of that, though. Enough of tooting my own horn, I suppose. Okay. So we kind of talked about everything we want to talk about. I think we talked about the ones that are super useful, tools that I think would be super useful. Those 5 tools we talked about that would be useful for any sort of new dungeon master or game master. Those the NPC details and name list, the secret clues and rumor generation aspect, a description framework for how to describe things in a competent manner, how to a framework for building encounters that are really good, and having some way to generate quests. I think all of those would be super good for a brand new dungeon master, game master. But maybe you had our little break and you thought about stuff and you're maybe not sure exactly what you want, or you are an intermediate dungeon master, game master, like a lot of us are. And you're like, one of the things I struggle with the most, and I feel like I hear this most often, is like improvisation. What are tools that will help me with improv? Because sometimes I don't know what I need to kind of spur that on. Again, the NPC names list, stuff like that's always really good, and traits and motivations. anything that'll give you the ability to make an NPC very quickly or get some one or two aspects of them really quickly will mm, that'll that'll really do it for you. Conversation prompts, thing that gives you something to talk about that's like rumors or something that people are talking about. What's kind of the hubbub, the news, what's the thing for the NPCs. It can be sometimes useful if you have very shy groups of players who don't initiate a lot of conversations with the NPCs, who have NPCs create the conversation starters. Like what are prompts that would cause you could probably come up with a list of probably a D20 list of ideas pretty quickly and think about, okay, if I saw a bunch of travelers come in, what are things that I might want to talk to them about? And it's like obviously some sort of adventure like side quest prompt is going to be a good one. News about what's going on, maybe get their take about like some monsters in the area. Maybe they want to know things that can do that. Maybe there's somebody who's looking for like self-defense tips. Maybe somebody who's looking for uh, give out jobs like caravan guards, stuff like that is really common. Um, Somebody who's like, "Oh, are you headed in this direction?" Asking if they're going in a place because either they want to tag along, again, the caravan guard, or they're like, uh, I have a message or something that I want to get delivered to somebody there. Could you do that for me? Like, I will pay you to deliver a message for me if you're already going there." Those sorts of things. Side quest sparks and local rumors about stuff that you can add for throw into your game to be like, here's a lot of stuff that you guys could do while you're in town. Nice little short adventures, which is nice for a nice like palate cleanser after maybe doing like a big dungeon or a big adventure to go back to town and not just do downtime, but maybe have downtime and have a little bit of downtime, then have an opportunity for maybe like these side quests that might be like a one shot or like a two shot, then get back, do a little bit more downtime, and then maybe jump out and do the next big adventure. It's really great if you are a person like me who likes to homebrew most of your adventures and create all that stuff from scratch and not run a ton of modules. Be like, oh, I just need time to make like a larger adventure, so I'll pick like create like a small adventure that'll be like a one shot, like a 5-room dungeon or a 2-shot investigation thing that they need to do in the town, or they need to go deliver something to the next village up the road, and that might take a session or two, just to give me that time to keep working on maybe a larger adventure that I have planned. And some sort of complication table that can be really helpful for some sort of prompts that allow you figure out what to give you some inspiration when you have things that are like, the answer is yes and, or yes but, or the answer is no but, or no and this other thing. Can be really helpful as to give you an idea about how to, like, just in the same way that you have those spark tables for like a side quest or to like kick off an adventure, an idea of an adventure, having something for that, for like what potential complications might arise to saying yes or no to a specific situation, how that might be blunted or how that might be worse depending on what the answer is. Things like description aids are really useful if you're like that. Like I have a weather generator that I use, which is fun. We have that environment dressing. We have the wilderness dressing tables that I use, that kind of stuff. A roll table for like architectural details, things that are going on. Tables for, we just showed one off, a table for random colors or textures or sounds or smells. If you have a hard time improvising like narrative descriptions of places, and that's something that you want to work on, or you want to pre-build that before you get it to the table, even having those kind of tables is super helpful. That's why I really love like my dungeon dressing one, because it's only a D20 table, but there's so much in that table that's really useful. To gets me to think of like, how do I connect this to other things that are also going on in like a dungeon or going on in the location, or just having like a table of architectural elements is really useful. I feel like I personally don't need that because over time I have just soaked that up my brain has soaked that up like a sponge, soaked up that lexicon of like a lot of architectural things where I can throw out things like plinth and apse and niches and mezzanines and coffers and buttresses and colonnades and all sorts of that, porticos, etc. Having all those kinds of things and being able to throw those around very, very easily. But if you don't have that, which is 1000% understandable, this is a sort of thing that's just how my brain works, that I like to soak that stuff up like a sponge. And my brain works like that. Adding those little things in. Hey, get yourself a little roll table or some sort of like randomizer for like, or find yourself like an architectural dictionary or something like that you can just flip to a random page and just start pulling stuff out. Anything like that is really, really useful, like a little glossary or something like that. Any sort of encounter tools for terrains and hazards, a reference for like monster tactics and reinforcements and morale procedures that help you deal with combat as it goes on. Ensure that it stays lively from the very beginning to the very end of your encounter. Very useful. Or, you know, one of the things that gets really, really overlooked a lot, having a cover and obscurement reference, because I think I could go around to most of the dungeon masters and game masters I know and ask them, hey, what are the rules for cover and obscurement? And they'd go, yeah. So I have this in here. It's right on the front page. It's like, oh, by the way, half cover plus 2 AC and dex save, 3/4 cover plus 5 AC and dex save. If you have total cover, you can only be targeted with area effects, and you get a +5 to AC and dex saves. Include those. So once you know that, as a player, when you're not running, you'd be like, oh, cover's like super powerful. I should be using cover all the time if I can. Anything that improves my AC and dex saves, like the two things that happen most of the time, definitely gonna jump in there and try to do that. Try to get that as much as I can. And obscurement is like disadvantage on perception checks and then disadvantage on attack rolls. Heavy obscurement's the same as the blinding condition, as if you had the blinding condition. Those I use often enough, and you incorporate it into my encounter building enough that I just happen to know them by rote now. Any sort of location aid. So if you're the sort of person who's like, you have players who always want to know like the tavern menu or stuff like that when they get in there. So having a thing that like details drinks and food. I think I have something up on DriveThruRPG. It's an older one now about like how to come up with a tavern menu. So if you want to ever go check that out, it's on DriveThruRPG. RedRaggedFiend over there. It's the storefront. All that stuff that I have up there is pay what you want. So if you don't have any money, perfectly acceptable, get the things you need for your game. Hey, if you can throw me a buck or two, feel free. Go and grab it, and I appreciate your patronage. Same thing with shops and stalls. I talked about my D100 that's right on the back side of that D100 NPCs. I use those together very often. Overland travel procedures. If you're like, every time that my players decide to travel from the city to whatever the adventure location is, I never know what to do with that. And I feel bad about just being like, and then they arrive. Like, I want to make it more interesting. So figure out if you want that kind of aspect of your game, figure out find a procedure that works for you. I've got one that works for me. If you want to see how that works, go watch our solo RPG on Saturday. We've used both the overland travel procedures and the hex crawl procedures, which are 2 different procedures now. And anything that helps you with like secrets and hidden details. Like I have the thing that allows me to figure out where treasure is and whether it's hidden or where it might be, or how to hide secrets, or how to add those aspects, or like clues and stuff like that, having those things in there. And any sort of prep tools. If you struggle to come up with quests, get a quest generator like my Questomatic, like build something like that. Things that help you come up with complications or twists or revelations that kind of come up. It's twists and revelations and like turnabouts are really great for adventures when used sparingly. Don't use them all the time. If you do, your players will see it coming a mile away, and you'll get the one, and then after that they'll always be expecting the turnaround or some sort of twist. And if you need anything that's like faction creation, if you're running a larger world building or larger campaign, and things that let you manage things like clocks and timers and how to build factions and what does escalation look like for that. There's so many resources out there, and Ironsworn has one. I mean, Blades in the Dark is kind of the go-to for like clocks and timers, and Powered by the Apocalypse engine is very good for like building factions and motivating them and seeing what their escalation looks like. But you can go grab those because they're all somewhat different systems, and take them and crib them into whatever makes sense for you and your game and your style of game. Very useful. So most of this talked about is about creating things that are going to help you shore up your DM weaknesses, your dungeon master or game master weaknesses, things that are going to make you better at the table. So think about the things that you struggle as a DM. Hopefully during the break you were doing that, and then let me tell you about some of the things that I might struggle with. Obviously, improvising colors. Obviously, I felt like I had a problem with coming up with traps and hazards. I had some go-to ones, and I would always do those all the time. NPCs not usually too much of an issue. Again, sometimes I fall into the same trap with doing things like describing moving around in the wilderness or the overworld portion or even the dungeon, about like how do I make this descriptive and more interesting. So that's why I have my dressing tables. I was gonna say details table, dressing tables for those different environments. Like, oh, these are things that I can put together and allows me to very quickly make these things a little bit more unique, or make it not feel like every chamber in a dungeon cave feels like a copy paste chamber. Like it's all, it's like gray stone and there's stalactites. Sometimes you want stuff that's different in there, so it gives me a way to do that very quickly without me having to sit there and really think hard about it and slow down the game and use all my executive, like, creative juice on trying to figure out how do I make this cavern room look different than the last 3 cavern rooms. That's not a good use of my creative juice when I could just roll some dice and figure it out very, very. And I think one of the things that also comes up with this, that certainly something that, and I fell into when I talked about, like, there are things in here that I don't really use, and we didn't touch, I don't think we really touched on anything that I don't use that I don't want to use, but we do have some. We touched on one, which was the dungeon encounters, and there's a whole thing in here after my wilderness dressing. There's a whole section of random wilderness encounters. And I realized after that, oh, I don't need those. Those don't make sense. So you should be aware of some, just like the market stalls. Market stalls was a good one. Stalls and shops was a good one. When you're looking to identify and like shore up sometimes your DM weaknesses or GM weaknesses, you want to be aware of false positives. Like if you think, I struggle with making taverns, or in my case, like market stalls and shops, to make the markets more interesting. So it's not just market, copy, paste, market, copy, paste, market. How do I make those things? How do I make settlements? How do I make shops? How do I make taverns interesting? And that can be a bit of a false positive, because the real question might be, do those locations, do your town locations need to be interesting? Question mark? Why? Question mark? Because unless you need the players have expressed some sort of need or desire to spend more time role-playing interactions in town that's not dedicated to a distinct quest that they're on, that they're like, oh, we want more shopping. And maybe you do get that feedback where they're like, we want more shopping sessions where we're doing just shopping and like bumming around town. We want some sort of break from maybe like the hardcore adventure, death-defying stuff that's happening in D&D. We're like, yeah, we kind of want like we want a beach episode. We want our hot springs episode. We want something that's like a bit of a break in the mold, and they want a pace break is what they want. They might want that. In case, then yeah, you might want to make those things more interesting. But Truth is that is probably not the case in the vast majority of games, I feel like. Most of the time, it's better to speed up and get your players into the adventure at hand. And this is the thing that I struggle with, Master, because I am want to do RP whenever my players are like, I'm going to go talk to an NPC, or I'm going to go have this interaction. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm here to... That's one of my jobs as the Dungeon Master Game Master, is to facilitate this thing. But sometimes it's like, we don't really need a 5-minute scene for you to buy rations. You go to the store and buy rations. Done. Knock it off the list. Does anybody else need to buy anything before we leave? So it's most important for you to, unless they have a really specific reason why they're going to do something, maybe just kind of like speed up that experience. That it really doesn't matter what the tavern's serving. It doesn't really matter what shops or stalls are in this town. And sometimes I'll have players in my current campaign who are like, well, we're just going to bum around and see what there is to see. And so I'm like, okay, so I end up improvising and doing a lot of RP and things like a market session. But none of that's actually necessarily important, because they're often not looking for a very specific thing, or they're not being super clear about what it is they're looking for. And I need to be better about, instead of letting that emerge through the RP, instead of being like, what is it specifically you're looking for? And that way I can tell you whether you're going to find it here or not. Because the worst thing to do as a Dungeon Master, at least for me, is when I get into a scene and I start that RP and they're thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z out of this interaction. And then I realize, oh no, there's no way you would get X, Y, and Z out of this. And then I have to kind of tell them a no in the mid-conversation, because it's not going to make sense for this person to be able to do this thing, or have this information, or anything like that. Usually I try to give it a soft no and be like, no, but maybe this person over here would have that information that you're seeking out, or an item for the thing that you're looking for. But we could have saved ourselves a lot of hassle if I knew specifically what you were looking for and why. So sometimes it's about like, are your players RP starved? I don't think my players are particularly RP starved. I think they are eating well. They are eating just fine at the RP table. But the location is not what is usually important in these areas. It's your players. So if they want more RP, instead of making just more RP in general for stuff that doesn't matter, give them more important NPCs to deal with, that they can interact with as part of the actual adventure, and not the in-between adventure space, unless they are specifically saying, hey, we're looking for some, like, a pace shift. And that's what you're reading from them, is they're more like, oh, we keep going from like adventure to adventure to adventure. It'd be nice to like take a break and just kind of have like a down, like I said, like a hot springs episode or a beach episode, to use very anime terms. Be like, oh, we just kind of have a little side adventure that's really nothing's going on, and we're just kind of having a break in the action, a bit of levity before things get kind of serious again. So here's the thing, is that it's great when you get that feedback from your players. You're like, yes, they want to be absolutely immersed in the world. That's great. So help you see if you can create like 1 to 2 tables that are going to make that more interesting. For me, that's like the wilderness dressing and doing things like, hey, what's happening in town when you get to town? Like, those things aren't interesting, and they can RP, and it's an opportunity to tell them more about the world and things that are going on in the world, and for them to discover things while they're out and about, moving around in the wilderness. But, and not necessarily RP related. It could be, have some tavern games. You can have those food and drink items. All of those things you can create that are not actually RP focused for the most part. You could have some interesting random NPCs to engage with, sure, every once in a while. Having like a short list of people who maybe live in that settlement, who are just kind of like the recurring side characters, who might not be tangibly important to whatever quest is going on, but it's much easier to, whenever you have players that are looking for RP opportunities, to have like 3 NPCs in a city or town or whatever that are kind of facilitate that duty, than having to constantly make up one note NPCs again and again and again just to add things out. Not super useful, and it's certainly not really immersive, and either they're going to forget who these NPCs are, or they're going to try to go back to an NPC and you're going to forget who they are. Because you're like, I don't know, that was like a one-time NPC I improvised like 10 sessions ago. I don't remember who that is or what's going on with them. So all's well as long as what you're doing isn't making the game more fun at the expense of someone else's fun. And that includes yourself as well. If you're like, man, I really want to get this adventure going, but my players are spending all this time like in town just bumming around, talking to random things, people will be like, well, stop giving them interesting people to talk to. You're doing your job too well. And get them back on the thing of adventure and get them towards what you're doing. Fill that out. Or if you're at a mismatch where you're like, everybody's enjoying this. If everybody's enjoying this, including yourself, you actually don't need to push that. Just let it be. It's going to be good. Everybody's going to enjoy it. There are plenty of games, I think the online dialogue talks about, where a dungeon master or game master is frustrated that like all their players, all they do is sit around in the tavern kind of waiting for things to happen to them. I was like, well, make something happen in the tavern. Have somebody approach them with adventure instead of waiting for them to go find the adventure. This is a struggle that I've had with my current campaign, which, like I said, I run a much more sandbox kind of campaign. So I expect, and each character kind of has their own motivations and things, goals about what they're trying to do, personal things, but they're not always the greatest at going after stuff. And it is, to my perspective, something that's a lot more of a newer D&D player issue than I think an older player issue. Kind of depends about the time that you get into the hobby and what the zeitgeist is about, like what the game is. Where I think a lot of people kind of come into the game now with this idea that the dungeon master is going to like set out this almost interactive storybook adventure for you, which is very different than older editions of D&D, where it's more like, hey, this is a world and you are here. You have a fully fleshed out character and you have your own motivations and reasons to go do stuff. And yeah, there's going to be some big adventures that you might have to take along the way that's going to rear its head. And you might be the only people capable and willing and have the opportunity to actually stop it. And so you are going to be called to be heroes. But in and around those very specific instances, you still have things that you are motivated to do on your own accord. Players play very differently. And I feel like that is something that's very common in campaign, that weird underwater campaign that I'm playing in, is that 2 of the 3 characters, PCs, are very, very motivated with personal agendas. My character and one of the other characters has stuff that's like, we have stuff to do. And yeah, there's a huge war that's going on, and yeah, we're totally embroiled in that, and yeah, we're doing the big damn heroes thing, but also, like, I got this totally other mission that I also need to do, and it's of honestly almost equal importance than, hey, a big war, than my part in a big war. So think about that. So kind of to end this out, if you have those things, what are the things that make you better as a dungeon master or game master, that shore up your weaknesses, that bring your highs to their highest and keep your lows from being the lowest? So if you have tools and tables or references, all those kinds of things, guides that you swear by, and please drop them in the comments, especially if there's something for like third party or first party things that you want to share that we can all take a look at. I'd love to check them out myself. And talk about personal tools are great tools, and first or third party, if you have stuff that is your own construction, like obviously I shared a lot of stuff, but there's plenty of places you guys can share that. You can share it off on Reddit, or if you want to put it together for a thing that people can download, you can put it up on the Drive-Thru RPG or a DM's Guild or itch.io. there are ways for you to share things and make it, like I do, make it a pay what you want, make it very low entry so people you can just share the things that you love that have helped make you a better dungeon master or game master, and hopefully will make somebody else a better game master as well. But I think that's a great place to end this one. Thanks very much for hanging out with me, guys. Again, if you want to see more of our stuff, you want to catch up on our solo adventure, which we're going to do this Saturday, fingers crossed. We're going to drop in this Saturday, so if you want to catch up on that, you can go to the channel page. There is a full playlist that's got everything up to it, so if you want to see how we built the campaign, up to how we started it, and how I got to the point where my main character in a solo RPG, my only character in a solo RPG, is dead, and how do you keep a campaign going when your main character dies? Hey, we're doing it together, so you can come check us out, and we're going to do more of that this Saturday. Other things, we already talked about the pay what you want stuff over on DriveThruRPG. You can go check that out. Lots of other like DM tips and fun stuff down there. Got lots of stuff to check out. We also have the old blog, RedRaggedFiend.com. You can go check that out. For older stuff, some of that deals with some of these tables that I've made in the past. So you can go find some extra tidbits, maybe some stuff that we didn't cover in this specific video. But otherwise, sound off in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.